Chapter 531 Dawn of a Mutation. On the night the King Consortium completely lost track of the experimentals, no one noticed a Japanese creeper vine growing in a winding fashion along a wall in the corner of Stronghold 61 where the battle between the A-rank hitmen and the Pyro Company took place. That creeper vine had been planted a long time ago, and the walls of the residences on the road were already fully covered by it. Whenever someone passed by here in the summertime, they would get a refreshing feeling just by looking at the lush, green walls. On the day of the battle, some members of the Pyro Company's dust team had been killed under that wall. After they died, blood from their corpses seeped into the soil and mixed with the creeper vine's roots. When night fell, a fat rat crawled out of the sewers and cautiously scavenged for food. It was attracted to the creeper vine where the scent of blood was still lingering from before. However, the creeper vine seemed to come alive as it reached out a small tendril and attempted to touch the rat with its feeler. The rat hopped 2 steps back in fear and looked cautiously at the creeper vine's feeler as though it were a human hand. But when the rat realized that it was only a plant, it became less wary and approached it again. The creeper vine's soft feeler caressed the rat on its head, and it felt like the plant was very curious. This was probably the first time it was seriously trying to understand this world in its own way. As the feeler caressed the rat's head like it was helping to scratch an itch, the rat squinted its eyes in enjoyment. But a moment later, the creeper vine's feeler suddenly splayed open and spiked into the rat's body. In just an instant, the rat was pierced all the way through and dragged into the dense foliage of the creeper vine. Before it died, the rat only had time to let out a squeak before falling silent. Meanwhile, the creeper vine spread across the wall still looked ever so quiet and beautiful. The tour group arrived at Stronghold 78 early the next morning. After getting their tires patched, they had immediately continued the journey. Just as Ren Xiaosu had guessed, the tour group reached Stronghold 78 before the vehicle recovery team even set off. Fang Ji finally took Zhou Yingshui's suggestion and purchased another 2 off-road vehicles to temporarily store their supplies and vehicle maintenance tools. He even hired a local mechanic at a high salary to follow the tour group. They had really been terrified by the incident last night. What if they had not encountered the repair team, but an even more ruthless group of robbers? Fang Ji knew all too well that if they were stranded in a wilderness without rules, most men would be very interested in laying their hands on the female singer, Li Ran. When they arrived at the stronghold, Li Ran brought Zhou Yingzu along with her wherever she went this time, and the 2 women looked to be as close as sisters. If Ren Xiaosu did not know what it was really like behind the scenes, he would probably have fallen for it. Li Ran took Zhou Yingzu to various events and banquets as she did not want Zhou Yingzu to have any free time for herself. At the same time, since Zhou Yingzu was participating in the events with Li Ran, Ren Xiaosu would have to tag along as her assistant. At this moment, Li Ran proudly told Zhou Yingzu, "The main reason I came to the Zhou Consortium for a concert tour was to meet up with a movie director at Stronghold 73. I think he's filming a new movie soon, and if I manage to get the lead actress role, I'll push him to make you the supporting actress." Li Ran's words made Zhou Yingzu roll her eyes. She knew that Li Ran was only trying to show off in front of her. Otherwise, she would not mention something like that for no reason. However, Ren Xiaosu asked, "Are there still people making movies?" "Of course, they're even in color," Li Ran said proudly. Ren Xiaosu had only been living in the Central Plains strongholds for a short while, so he did not know there were outdoor cinemas showing movies in many of the strongholds here. There were projectionists who would specially set up the screens and use a projector to play the movies. Every time there was a movie screening, large groups of men, women, seniors, and children would gather in front of the screens, while vendors selling cigarettes, soft drinks, and edible seeds would come around to peddle their wares. Such scenes did not exist in the southwest and northwest and only happened here in the Central Plains. But when Zhou Yingzu was attending a banquet, she received some texts from the Anjing house. However, the mission this time was a little different. A large number of the Pyro Company members have already sneaked into Stronghold 73 and are accompanied by some riders. We suspect the targets are searching for the pre-cataclysm site of a Pyro Company research lab. The location of the site is in the vicinity of East Lake. This is a very valuable lab that likely conducted research in the field of life sciences. A technological breakthrough was achieved before the cataclysm, and the results can be deployed to a wide range of medical fields. There is no quota of participants for this mission. The reward for killing a member of the Pyro Company's Midnight Squad is 150,000 yuan, while each member of the Dusk Squad killed will get a reward of 500,000 yuan. Only successful hunters will be eligible for the trials next spring. As they stood on the lawn outside the banquet grounds, Ren Xiaosu and Zhou Yingzu were stunned by the texts for this mission. Ren Xiaosu wondered, has the Anjing house ever assigned such a vicious mission in the past? This is as good as asking all of the A-rank hitmen to hunt down the Pyro Company members. Ren Xiaosu took out a C-rank cell phone he had recently stolen. To his surprise, he saw this phone had also received the same text. So the Anjing house had issued this mission to everyone. Even C-rank hitmen were eligible to take part. The most ruthless thing about this mission is that it was sent as a group text. Zhou Yingzu said, the Anjing house definitely knows that many of their cell phones have landed in the hands of people with ulterior motives. Master, I'm not insinuating that you're one of them. Ren Xiaosu raised an eyebrow. Go on. There should be one or two of the Anjing house's cell phones in the hands of the various forces. Although they can't receive the A-rank mission texts, they can still occasionally guard against the assassination missions targeting some of their important members. Zhou Yingzu said, previously, someone from the Zhou Consortium was targeted through a B-rank mission, and all of their crimes were even listed. But before the hitmen could arrive, that person was arrested and interrogated by the Zhou Consortium themselves. So these group texts were sent out with the intention of reaching those forces. They're hoping more people will show up and stop the Pyro Company. Ren Xiaosu nodded. If it's simply a mission to kill Pyro Company personnel, it probably won't tempt would-be hitmen into joining. However, the lab research that can be sold at astronomical prices will be enough to change their minds. I'm afraid that the Zhou Consortium themselves will also be moved by the offer. After all, this lab lies within their territory. The texts emphasize the value of the lab, yet the Anjing house has not shown any interest in the lab research at all. Curious. This showed the Anjing house clearly knew there were people other than hitmen who had obtained their cell phones, but they just didn't care. All they did was to ensure the A-rank hitmen were issued with cell phones that only they could access. Actually, they had deliberately allowed others to obtain the cell phone so they could upset the apple cart at the critical moment. But why would the riders go with the Pyro Company to search for the site of the research lab? How did these two organizations get involved with each other? Ren Xiaosu wondered. Chapter 532 Pyro and Riders. Ren Xiaosu's impression of the riders was still rather good. The rider he encountered was very polite and relatively impartial when dealing with matters. Ren Xiaosu completely agreed with the rider's decision on banning the students from gambling, because Ren Xiaosu knew too well what gamblers were like. But why would a reputable organization like the riders help the Pyro Company search for something? Unless, of course, they had a common goal. Didn't you say that the Qinghe group's been searching for their major shareholder's heir? But they still did not manage to find him after this many years. Ren Xiaosu asked puzzledly. Yes, this info has been circulating around for a long time, so it's not a secret anymore. Zhou Yingzu said, but it seems that a lot of information has been lost due to the cataclysm. After all, the Qinghe group did not seem to have managed too well in the first few years after the cataclysm, and the founder also sacrificed himself to ensure the survival of the organization. Ren Xiaosu muttered, the heir of the founder couldn't have ended up in a research lab of the Pyro Company, right? Stressed, Zhou Yingzu said, Master, let's not talk about other things for now, and focus on this mission. Only those who manage to kill the Pyro Company's members this time will qualify for the trials next year. How am I supposed to go to Stronghold 73 when Li Ran is keeping me close to her every day? When Ren Xiaosu thought about it, it dawned on him that this was really the case. Although they did not need to apply to do the mission this time, Zhou Yingzu could not leave for the time being. Moreover, Zhou Yingshui's fingerprints were required to unlock the cell phone to take pictures of the targets and complete the mission. In other words, Zhou Yingzu would have to be present at the site. Ren Xiaosu pondered it for a bit. It's fine, I'll make a trip there and bring back someone for you to kill. Zhou Yingzu was shocked on the spot. Master, can your ideas not always be so extreme? Stronghold 73 is more than 400 kilometers away from here. Are you just going to carry someone back for me to complete the mission? What else can I do? Ren Xiaosu glanced at her. Do you have any better ideas? Don't worry, I'll think of other methods on my way there. Master, be careful, Zhou Yingzu said. I'm afraid that all of the underworld criminals of the Central Plains will be trying to get into Stronghold 73 this time, and they can be a really mixed bag. Ren Xiaosu nodded. I'll relay your message to them to be careful. Zhou Yingzu was confused. With that, Ren Xiaosu did not waste any more time and headed right off into the darkness of the night. Li Ran, who was dressed in an evening gown, walked out of the banquet grounds with a glass of champagne in her hand. Sparkling bubbles could even be seen fizzing in the exquisite crystal glass. Walking over, Li Ran asked Zhou Yingzu, and where's he off to? Oh, Zhou Yingzu smiled and said, I asked my assistant to head back to the hotel first so he can make the bed for me. HMPH. Li Ran turned around and walked off. Just as Zhou Yingzu had guessed, the entire underworld of the Central Plains was getting restless due to the actions of the Anjing house. In just half a day after the group texts were sent out, the black market outside of Luoyang City had become half empty. The mob bosses who had been forced to live in seclusion here successively sprang into action and left the black market. After all, they would have to make more money to better enjoy life. In the entire alliance of strongholds, it was said that one could get rich overnight by obtaining research data from the laboratories. Even if they only managed to get their hands on one page, it could very well fetch them enough to last a lifetime. This was the data of the life sciences research the Pyro Company had been conducting before the cataclysm. More importantly, the Anjing House claimed there was already a breakthrough in this field of research, so the implication was that it was ready for industrial application. Meanwhile, the Zhou Consortium had started setting up checkpoints around Stronghold 73. They even planned to deploy 2 brigades of troops and station them outside the stronghold. You could say they were taking this matter very seriously. However, it would take time to mobilize the troops, and the 2 brigades would take at least 3 days to get here from the other strongholds. This military operation was not just a matter of sending out the troops, but also required the logistics lines to be ready. But to the surprise of all the various forces, the 2 brigades were redirected to garrison at the Zhou Consortium's stronghold in the farthest west before they could arrive at Stronghold 73. This puzzled everyone a great deal. Was the Zhou Consortium planning to ignore the situation at Stronghold 73? But there was nothing at Stronghold 74 in the farthest west. There was only a mountain range 100 kilometers farther west of that stronghold, so why was the Zhou Consortium garrisoning their troops there? Could there be anything more important than what was going to happen at Stronghold 73? Of course, no one knew the King Consortium had already sent even more important intelligence to the Zhou Consortium. As such, after the 2 brigades were redeployed to the west, the Zhou Consortium mobilized other troops to rush to Stronghold 73. However, it did not matter to the underworld criminals. They were only concerned about where the Pyro Company's pre-cataclysm research lab was. During the past few days when the Zhou Consortium was busily redeploying its troops, all kinds of criminal figures had entered Stronghold 73 through their own means before martial law was enforced. As they did not dare to check into the hotels, they could only hide in houses and quietly observe the situation from there. Some of them were so pathetic they had nowhere else to go and could only hide in the spa center every day. They even had to make sure to avoid the patrols of Stronghold 73. After all, not everyone had a safe house in Stronghold 73. Meanwhile, Ren Xiaosu was already tucking into his takeout hot dry noodles, inside a safe house. This was the first safe house Wu Tong had arranged for them to rendezvous at during the previous mission. This safe house used to belong to Wu Tong, but it belonged to Ren Xiaosu now. After all, Wu Tong was dead. Since the house was without an owner, Ren Xiaosu gladly occupied it as his own. Ren Xiaosu did not find it difficult to get into the stronghold. However, he had observed something outside earlier. At some point, Ren Xiaosu felt the Zhou Consortium had even relaxed their inspection of the people entering the stronghold. It was as though they were deliberately letting this mixed bag of people into the stronghold. But why was that? Did they intend to use these people to keep the Pyro Company in check? In Ren Xiaosu's opinion, wouldn't it be much safer to just station the troops inside the stronghold itself? What was the Zhou Consortium planning? A curfew had already been temporarily enforced within Stronghold 73, something that was still rarely seen in the Central Plains. Some of the strongholds here were even known to be sleepless cities, with bustling sights lasting throughout the night and into the morning. After finishing his hot dry noodles, Ren Xiaosu headed out again. The Anjing house had appended more information about the mission and indicated that the Pyro Company had arrived in the vicinity of East Lake near Stronghold 73. Although they had lost track of their whereabouts, it was very possible the research laboratory was located right next to East Lake. However, it was likely the Pyro Company had not discovered the entrance of the research laboratory yet. Ren Xiaosu was parkouring freely up on the roofs. Occasionally, he would notice there were also others up on the roofs looking at something. Vanilla was walking with the elderly sugar painter in the shadows on the streets not far away. Dressed in his smart suit, he seemed wholly unrelated to the old man beside him. The old man muttered, "There's too many formidable people this time. You should tell me in advance what the Anjing house is planning. I don't want to take too many risks." Vanilla adjusted his tie and said with a smile, "With you and me working together, and the other Anjing house members supporting us, who would be a match for us in this stronghold?" Chapter 533 A Dark and Stormy Night. Things were already stirring in Stronghold 73. The underworld criminals were hiding in the stronghold and waiting for their opportunity to strike. As East Lake spanned a very large area, it would be impossible to pinpoint the research laboratory's location when the Anjing house only stated that it was in the vicinity of East Lake. So everyone was just waiting for the Pyro Company to find the research laboratory's entrance before making their move to seize the research data. Although the criminal underworld was no match for the members of the Pyro Company in a one-on-one battle, everyone knew there would be a lot of people involved when the conflict broke out. Furthermore, the A-rank hitmen from the Anjing house would be participating in the battle as well. Once the situation turned chaotic, as long as they could get their hands on some of that research data, they could sell it for a sky-high price. However, the mob bosses still remained hidden in the spa center. It was not like they enjoyed soaking in the hot bath and scrubbing their backs, but that most of them had been placed on the watch lists of the various consortiums. If they were to go outside and get recognized by people, the Zhou Consortium might just arrest them on the spot. It was not only they who were lying low. Even Vanilla and the elderly sugar painter, the Pyro Company, and the riders were also hiding their presence in the stronghold. Only Ren Xiaosu could openly take a night run around East Lake like nothing was going on. Fortress 178 had already destroyed all the information that would visually identify Ren Xiaosu, while the King Consortium was also helping him keep secret, so it didn't matter if the people of the Central Plains had heard of his deeds. At the very least, they couldn't recognize him even if they met him by chance. Ren Xiaosu seemed like an ordinary student in Stronghold 73 wearing his blue sportswear that looked just like a school uniform. Besides, to be honest, even the intelligence personnel of the various forces did not suspect anything when they saw Ren Xiaosu running around East Lake at night. That was because everyone felt that no one would dare wander around so casually in this tense period. Furthermore, Ren Xiaosu looked really young, like someone in his teens. No matter how they looked at him, he just did not seem like a ruthless person. Hence, Ren Xiaosu got neglected by the various forces as they treated him like an invisible person in Stronghold 73. While Ren Xiaosu was taking his night run, a cleaner nearby spoke into his earpiece, "He's likely a young resident of the stronghold, so we can eliminate him as a suspect. There's no signs of weapons hidden on him." It was very easy for experts to tell if there were hidden weapons on someone, especially when a person was running. If they were hiding a dagger or a firearm on them, it would definitely not escape their eyes. There were many intelligence personnel scattered around the perimeter of East Lake. Everyone was keeping a close eye on this place. A voice laughed into the earpiece. "I really wish I could warn these people to not jog at the lake for a few days. It's too dangerous here, but since we're not good people anyway, there's no need to reveal ourselves to help these stronghold residents." The cleaner watched Ren Xiaosu's figure recede into the distance and said with a laugh, "Who cares if they live or die?" The voice in the earpiece said, "I heard that a movie director will be coming to East Lake with a film crew to shoot a movie in a few days. I've never seen a film crew before." The cleaner smiled and said, What's the big deal about a film crew? What we're doing here is even more exciting than in the movies. Although the cleaner did not try to persuade Ren Xiaosu to leave, another young man stopped him. This young man looked around 27 years old, and he said to Ren Xiaosu, "Please do not jog near East Lake for the next few days. It's about to get very dangerous here." Ren Xiaosu said in panic, "Why? Is something going to happen?" The young man thought for a moment and said, "This place is no longer safe. A lot of criminals will be gathering here soon." "Oh, all right, I'd better get back then. Are you from the Public Order Division?" Ren Xiaosu asked. "No," the young man shook his head. After talking to Ren Xiaosu, the young man went over to persuade the old ladies who were practicing their plaza dancing in the plaza next to East Lake. But the moment the young man opened his mouth, the old ladies started pushing him around. They said, "Why should we listen to you? That's right, do you own this place? Who are you trying to scare by saying this place isn't safe? I'm warning you, lad, if you insist on saying that, I'll lie down, right here." Ren Xiaosu chuckled at the scene unfolding before him. But amid the pushing and shoving, he suddenly noticed a triangular red scarf fall out of the young man's pocket. Ren Xiaosu was taken aback by the sight of this. He recalled what he saw back at the black market. Didn't the riders usually cover their faces with a red scarf when they were carrying out their missions? Could this person be a rider too? Due to the possibility that this place could get dangerous, the other party was patiently urging residents to leave the vicinity of East Lake. Why would an organization like them get involved with the Pyro Company? Just what were they searching for? As the actors got ready to step onto the stage that was Stronghold 73, Ren Xiaosu believed a good show was going to play out soon. But when Ren Xiaosu returned to his safe house, he was surprised to see a few texts had appeared on his recently acquired C-rank cell phone. Something was stolen from the library in Stronghold 73 last night. After a day of investigation, it was determined that the pre-Cataclysm local histories and location map of Stronghold 73 had gone missing from the reference section of the library. Confidential files of Stronghold 73 were stolen last night. The missing data are the topography map and infrastructural changes caused by the tectonic movements at Stronghold 73 over the past 70 years. Based on our deduction, this should be the work of the Pyro Company. Perhaps due to the changes in the landscape, the Pyro Company still hasn't located the entrance to the research lab. Because East Lake spans such a large area, it would probably take a normal person several days to finish covering the entire distance on a night run. Furthermore, the landscape had changed so much over the years that even the Pyro Company had to resort to stealing confidential files to slowly determine where the research laboratory was located. Ren Xiaosu looked at his cell phone and suddenly realized the Anjing house must have placed a great deal of emphasis on the Pyro Company's plan this time. So they might as well join the fray and start dictating the rhythm of how things would develop. Their purpose was to share all the information they knew with everyone they could. The Anjing house's goal was not the laboratory data. They were only looking to target the Pyro Company. The Pyro Company would definitely have access to some of the Anjing house's cell phones as well, right? For the Anjing house to announce every move the Pyro Company was making, Ren Xiaosu wondered how bad it would feel when they saw their plans getting leaked. Since Ren Xiaosu had nothing better to do, he headed to the largest spa center nearby to take a bath. He swore he was just curious to see what the underworld's mob bosses looked like and was not going there for anything else. After registering at reception, Ren Xiaosu entered the male section and saw a group of mob bosses with tattoos sitting in a circle inside the bath. It looked like they were discussing something. Ren Xiaosu carefully checked out the tattoos on these people with great interest. Some of them had tiger tattoos, dragon tattoos, and all sorts of fanciful decorative art on their bodies. Although there were also normal guests at the spa center, they did not dare to get close to the group of burly, tattooed men sitting in the bath. However, Ren Xiaosu went over and sat in the bath as though he knew them, and this rather dumbfounded the mob bosses. Ren Xiaosu pointed at a twin koi tattoo on a man's arms and asked, "What does this tattoo mean? Does it bring you good luck?" "No," the mob boss looked calmly at Ren Xiaosu. "I was born on a dark and stormy night 30 years ago on March 11th. Just as Ren Xiaosu was waiting to hear a rattling story, the mob boss suddenly said, "So since my birthday falls on March 11th, I'm a Pisces." Chapter 534 Doctor of the Black Mark. When the mob boss said that, Ren Xiaosu burst into laughter. His fucking horoscope sign was Pisces, so that was how they got their tattoos. He looked at a mob boss with a tiger tattoo. Then you must be born in the year of the tiger. And I'm guessing that other guy was born in the year of the dragon. Those mob bosses looked at Ren Xiaosu calmly before gradually feeling that something was off. Who the hell are you? When they saw Ren Xiaosu did not even have a single tattoo on him from head to toe, it was obvious he was just a normal guy. The other regulars had run off to the showers, yet this kid actually dared to enter the bath they were soaking in. But before they could question him further, they suddenly heard a din outside. Everyone turned around to look and were surprised to see someone helping a wounded man in. One of the mob bosses frowned and asked, "What happened?" The person supporting the big man replied, "We ran into our foes. We won a lot of money from them back at the black market, but they were too scared to do anything to us there. Unfortunately, we bumped into them here and they attacked us." He got slashed twice. "Let me see." The mob bosses got up and lifted the wounded man's shirt to see two deep cuts, one each on his chest and back. As the wounds were very deep, it did not look too favorable for the injured man. One of the mob bosses sighed. "Bro, we can't get you to the hospital here in Stronghold 73, so I'm afraid that your wounds can't be treated. Don't worry, we'll take good care of your wife and kids." The big man's face was deathly pale. "But I think I can still be saved. If you go to the hospital, wouldn't our presence in the stronghold be exposed?" One of the bosses said. "When that happens, the Zhou Consortium will capture all of us. Have you forgotten that we kidnapped some members of the Zhou Consortium 2 years ago? If we get caught, we'll definitely pay with our lives. Don't worry, we're loyal brothers and definitely won't let your wife and children starve to death." The wounded man rolled his eyes before losing consciousness. However, a voice next to them said, "I can save him." Everyone turned around and saw Ren Xiaosu walk over in a bathrobe through the steam. "I can stitch him up and treat his wounds with a secret ancestral remedy. I guarantee that he'll fully recover within 3 days. However, I suppose it's not too much to ask for 500,000 yuan in exchange for saving his life, right?" "No, not at all." The wounded man regained consciousness. "I have money." Upon hearing that, Ren Xiaosu pretended to walk over to his locker to retrieve the black medicine and a sewing kit. The mob bosses were all stunned when they saw what Ren Xiaosu was holding in his hands. "Isn't that a sewing kit used for patching up clothes? Why are you being so picky at this point in time?" Ren Xiaosu raised an eyebrow. "If it can save a life, that's a great outcome." While speaking, he started stitching up the wound with the sewing kit. As anesthetics weren't used, the big man was in so much pain he nearly went into shock. The mob bosses looked at one another. They knew they definitely couldn't go to the hospital while they were in the Zhou Consortium's stronghold. But over the next few days, there would probably be even more wounded people coming in, and even a minor wound could prove fatal. If there were really a shady doctor, like Ren Xiaosu around, it might just prove to be a blessing for them. However, the mob bosses decided to wait and see if this person were really capable of treating injuries first. Seeing how Ren Xiaosu remained calm at the sight of blood gushing out while stitching up the wound, the mob bosses were convinced that he at least had guts. After suturing the wounds, Ren Xiaosu took out the black medicine from his bathrobe and applied it onto the wounds. The big man's pale face rapidly regained a pink glow, and he was no longer sweating. "How is it? Are you feeling better?" asked one of the nearby mob bosses. "It's not painful anymore." "It really isn't painful," the big man said in astonishment. He turned to Ren Xiaosu and said, "Thank you so much, young man. Gratitude received from Zheng Hongling, +1. Immediately, everyone looked at Ren Xiaosu. Someone smiled and asked kindly, "Young man, how can we address you?" "Y'all can just call me Dr. Ren," Ren Xiaosu said with a harmless smile. "Look, why don't you come more often to the spa center during this period? We'll cover all of your expenses here. In return, we only ask that you help treat anyone who comes in wounded. And not to worry, we'll still pay for the treatment accordingly." During the conversation, the wounded man had one of his men bring a gambling chip over. He said, "This is a chip from the casino in the black market outside of Luoyang City. We normally don't keep our money in the consortium's banks, and we don't carry cash around since that's inconvenient. However, you can still easily exchange this chip for cash at the black market's casino. Ren Xiaosu had a look at it and was surprised to see a 500 engraved in gold on the chip. It looked like this chip was worth 500,000 yuan. The biggest denomination of chips used in ordinary casinos was usually 10,000 yuan. He did not expect that the spending power in Luoyang City's black market would be so great they even had to specially cater to these mob bosses with 500,000 yuan chips to carry around and easily make transactions with. This was as good as the currencies issued by the banks, with the casino chips the choice of currency for them. Ren Xiaosu took the chip and examined it. At certain angles, he could even see a strange pattern on it moving around. Next to him, one of the mob bosses explained, "This is a laser engraving technique used for anti-counterfeiting purposes. The engraving is encrypted and only a specific instrument can decrypt it." Ren Xiaosu smiled. "Sure, I'll accept it. How about this? I won't be coming here frequently, but if anyone requires medical attention, you all can just place a red cone at the entrance. When I see it, I will rush over as quickly as possible. Don't worry, there won't be any problems." Ren Xiaosu wondered how he ended up as a doctor of the black market. After this incident, Ren Xiaosu somehow became the most popular person in the spa center. Furthermore, ever since a wounded person came into the spa center, the place had ceased business operations, stating that renovations were in progress and they would not be open for business during the duration. On the third day, when Ren Xiaosu saw a red cone at the entrance, he walked into the spa center. However, it turned out no one was wounded this time. The burly man who had previously been wounded looked at Ren Xiaosu in embarrassment and asked, "Dr. Ren, can you please restitch me?" Ren Xiaosu was stunned. "Why do you request that?" The burly man, Zheng Hongning, took off his clothes, revealing his chest. "Look, my chest was supposed to have a dragon tattoo on it, but you stitched it up crookedly." Ren Xiaosu looked at the big green dragon on his chest in silence. He noticed the dragon's head and neck didn't quite match up. Zheng Hongning said anxiously, "A tattoo represents our reputation, and a severed dragon's head doesn't look auspicious either. Dr. Ren, do you provide any after-sales service or something? See, that's why I said that people in your choice of industry aren't suited to get tattoos. Since all you do is fight and kill, it requires more effort to stitch the wounds." Ren Xiaosu said unhappily, "I'm a black market doctor, so refusing to provide after-sales service has always been our principle." Zheng Hongning was stunned. However, he couldn't do anything to his benefactor. He thought of having to soak in the hot springs bath with his brothers later on, and every one of them sported those realistic tattoos while his was a dragon with a severed head. At this moment, another burly man who was wounded got carried in. When this wounded mob boss saw that Ren Xiaosu was also here, he was overjoyed. "Dr. Ren, please hurry up and treat my wounds." Ren Xiaosu thought for a moment and said, "I previously quoted 500,000 yuan for my service, right?" Even though the wounded man was in tremendous pain, he still nodded his head quickly. "Yes, I can afford to pay. How about this? I'll offer you an additional service. Pay me 50,000 yuan more and I'll stitch you up with your tattoo intact." Ren Xiaosu had come up with a new business idea. The wounded man glanced at the severed dragon's head on Zheng Hongning's chest and immediately nodded. 50,000 yuan. Deal. Zheng Hongning looked at Ren Xiaosu suspiciously. He could not help but feel that Ren Xiaosu had deliberately stitched his wound up crookedly. This black market doctor was indeed shady. He would do anything just to earn money. Chapter 535 The Anjing House declares war. Other than a few underworld mob bosses getting into fights inside Stronghold 73, it seemed like nothing else was really happening. Meanwhile, the Anjing House kept sending out texts to stir up the situation every day. However, the Pyro Company had still not found the entrance to the research laboratory. As long as the research laboratory's entrance was not found, no one would attack the Pyro Company in advance. After all, everyone wanted to get their hands on the data from that research laboratory. If anyone tried to kill the Pyro Company members at this moment, they would probably be stopped by others, too. Some people even speculated the Zhou Consortium was also probably waiting for things to happen, as it seemed they were turning a blind eye to this matter. The Zhou Consortium's troops had started to set up camp outside the stronghold, but there were no signs of panic in the stronghold as the criminals just continued to lie low. It was the calm before the storm brewing in the stronghold. Ren Xiaosu would take a stroll to the spa center every day without worries before heading for a night run around East Lake. The older women were still plaza dancing in the plaza, but the rider who tried to persuade them into thinking this place was unsafe was nowhere to be seen. This matter even got on the news in the stronghold, breaking. Young man attempts to stop ladies from plaza dancing but was threatened with extortion claims. When Ren Xiaosu was treating the mob boss's injuries, he asked, "Why don't y'all just stay quietly inside the spa center? If you keep picking fights like this, I'm afraid that all y'all will end up crippled before the pyro company can locate the research lab's entrance." The mob bosses already knew Ren Xiaosu was no ordinary person. After all, none of them had ever come across a miraculous medicine in the world that could heal deep wounds like theirs within 3 days. However, those mob bosses laughed and said, "Don't worry, with your treatment, we can recover from our wounds within 3 days. But they can't. If we just keep on fighting them, they'll eventually die first." Ren Xiaosu pondered for a moment. So there were many wounded people on the other side as well, huh? Can I ask which spa they're at? After all, there was money to be earned. One of the mob bosses was left speechless for a long time. He looked at Ren Xiaosu and said, "We'll pay you an additional 1 million yuan to not treat their injuries. You might not know this, but our feud with those bastards goes back a long time. To be honest, we even had thoughts about giving up on getting the lab data when we encountered our foes here in Stronghold 73. We really just want to eradicate them so badly." "All right then." Ren Xiaosu smacked his lips. Honestly, Ren Xiaosu really did not regard these mob bosses as potential enemies. After all, he had forced his way into a stronghold and even fought against an entire brigade. He really didn't think these so-called underworld mob bosses were a threat to him. These people were really not his match, nor were they worthy opponents for him. The core of this world was still the consortiums, as well as the powerful forces built around supernatural beings. Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and said with a sigh, "I still think y'all should be more rational. It's better to wait for updates from the Anjing house, then go and seize the lab data." After all, Ren Xiaosu would be happier to see the situation descend into chaos instead of 2 criminal organizations kill one another. They did not even fire the guns or go to the hospital because they were afraid of getting arrested by the Zhou Consortium. How boring. However, a mob boss said, "Dr. Ren, you don't understand the situation. We used to be the local power here at the Zhou Consortium's strongholds, but due to the other party's sneaky schemes, we were forced out and had to seek refuge at the black market outside of Luoyang City. You think we wanted to leave our homes? Now that we're back, of course we're seething with anger when we see our foes again. You're a doctor, so you don't understand how brutal the fighting and killing in this wild world is. There's vengeance on our minds. If we don't take revenge, outsiders will start looking down on us." Ren Xiaosu thought about it carefully. After much thinking, he felt he would earn money too slowly if there was only a patient or 2 coming in every few days. He turned to the mob bosses and said with a grin, "Then what about this? How much will you pay me if I help y'all wipe out the local power here?" The mob bosses suddenly looked at one another. The young man in front of them had such an innocent smile, but the words he said gave them the chills. But wasn't this young man a doctor? Someone laughed and said, "Dr. Ren, don't joke around. They have guns. We're not using ours only because we're worried about getting arrested by the Zhou Consortium. But if it really comes down to it, we'll still fire our weapons. That's not something that a doctor like you can handle, so don't underestimate us." Ren Xiaosu raised his eyebrows and did not say anything further. Just as Ren Xiaosu thought that such peaceful days would last for a while, the Anjing house sent out another extremely important text. The Pyro Company's safe house has been identified. It's located in the neighborhood at Swan Lake, and they have a total of 40 members in the stronghold. The number of riders in the stronghold is currently unknown. The location of the research lab is suspected to be in the original East Lake Tunnel, and the Pyro Company is still trying to locate the research lab's entrance. These were the exact words in the text. The mob bosses in the spa center rubbed their hands in glee as they were originally from this stronghold. Ren Xiaosu wondered, "East Lake Tunnel. Why haven't I heard of this place before?" "You don't know about it, do you? One of them said with a smile, "The East Lake Tunnel is pre-cataclysm infrastructure here in the stronghold. Apparently, the tunnel passes through the north and the south of the lake and shortened the travel time between both places. As the tunnel was very sturdy, it remained in use for many years after the cataclysm. However, the main structure was damaged by an earthquake over a decade ago. Although there was no water seepage, people said that it was in danger of collapsing. As such, the Zhou Consortium sealed off the East Lake Tunnel completely." The Zhou Consortium did not make any repairs to that tunnel? Ren Xiaosu asked. Of course not. The various consortiums are busy developing their weapons and military capabilities, and the basic construction capabilities are far worse than the pre-cataclysm times, one of them explained. However, that tunnel runs for a very long distance. Why would the lab be hidden in it? It's so fucking dark in that tunnel, and there are many emergency passageways that only maintenance workers are allowed to enter. Who knows if the lab might be hidden underground behind one of those doors. It seems that the Pyro Company was also very secretive with what they did in the past. One of them sighed. Ren Xiaosu packed his stuff and headed out of the spa. He did not have time to waste with this group of mob bosses anymore. At this moment, there were probably already countless criminals heading towards the East Lake Tunnel. This text was like a declaration of war by the Anjing House on the Pyro Company. "We have already found you and kinda know where your lab is. Many people are rushing over there right now, so are you going as well? If you don't turn up, with so many people on our side, they'll definitely locate your lab first. If you show up, you're gonna have to face all these enemies." It was very late at night now. Due to the curfew, there were no longer any pedestrians on the streets of Stronghold 73. The entire city looked deserted. As Ren Xiaosu walked down the dark streets where even the street lights were turned off, he knew this silence would not last for too long. It would get rowdy beyond belief in Stronghold 73 tonight. A gunshot rang out in the distance, and the report was like the prelude to a midnight feast under the night sky. Chapter 536 Biding his time. The night was like an overcast cloud hanging over the entire stronghold, and under this dark cloud, many people were making their way over to the East Lake Tunnel in a hurry. In the dark of the night, the pitch-black East Lake was like a giant magnet drawing in speckles of iron dust inside the stronghold. Ren Xiaosu had guessed many underworld criminals would turn up this time, but he did not expect so many. But upon further thinking, it rather made sense. Ignoring the other forces that had turned up, just the A-rank hitmen from the Anjing House alone would already number in the dozens. After all, only those who successfully killed members of the Pyro Company this time would qualify for the Anjing House trials next year. Ren Xiaosu reckoned that at least half of all the Anjing House's A-rank hitmen had shown up this time. However, the closer Ren Xiaosu got to East Lake, the more he felt that something was off. According to Zhou Yingzhu, the Pyro Company was not an organization that was easy to deal with. How else could they control 8 strongholds in a place like the Central Plains? Would a large organization like them allow their plans to get disrupted so easily? Furthermore, why did this research laboratory have to be located in an abandoned tunnel of all places? There were originally 3 entrances to the East Lake Tunnel, but according to the mob bosses at the Spa Center, 2 of these entrances had been sealed off. Hence, it was impossible to get in without resorting to a violent skirmish. There was only one tunnel entrance left, after all, and it was even in an airtight space and at the bottom of the lake. If the tunnel were to collapse, it would be hard for those who went in to come out alive since there would be nowhere to escape to. Looking at the fanatical eyes of those who were making their way towards the East Lake Tunnel, Ren Xiaosu slowed down. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu heard someone whispering a short distance away, "Isn't that the young man who went for those nightly jogs?" Ren Xiaosu spun around and was surprised to see a man in a cleaner's uniform he'd seen before. After all, it was rather eye-catching to see someone wearing an earpiece while doing cleaning. Ren Xiaosu was a little puzzled at that time. He wondered which organization this person who was pretending to be a cleaner was from. Did he really think no one would notice he was wearing an earpiece? But Ren Xiaosu simply ignored them. Rather, he was surprised when he turned around and saw a man wearing a director's vest leading about a dozen people with cameras and equipment on their shoulders. They were also rushing towards the East Lake Tunnel like the others. He was probably what they called a movie director, right? The director was running and shouting at the same time, "Move quickly. Don't miss out on capturing the most exciting scenes. When these scenes get edited into a documentary about superhumans, I'll be famous." Ren Xiaosu was stunned. Someone was even trying to film a documentary on superhumans. A moment later, Ren Xiaosu saw a familiar figure running extremely quickly in front of him. Ren Xiaosu felt that he looked quite familiar, but he could not remember who it was. Wait a minute, wasn't that fucking Wang Congjiang? How could he forget someone so important? He had copied the steam locomotive power from him, after all. But what was this guy doing at Stronghold 73? By the time Ren Xiaosu wanted to catch up to him and give him a good thrashing, Wang Congjiang was already nowhere to be seen. Ren Xiaosu didn't know where he had gone. When Ren Xiaosu reached the entrance of the tunnel, he was greeted by the sight of overgrown wildgrass everywhere. As it was already late fall, the vegetation here was starting to wither. Ren Xiaosu lay in the tall grass and did not rush in rashly. However, he saw the underworld criminals flick on their flashlights one by one and rush straight into the tunnel. When the people at the back saw those at the front rushing into the tunnel, they didn't think much and followed in right behind them. It was beginning to get very chaotic as hundreds of people gathered from nearby. Nobody had much time to process what was happening, and most of the people were only thinking about the astronomical prices they could get if they managed to get their hands on even a page of laboratory data. Only a minority could remain calm like Ren Xiaosu. However, Ren Xiaosu did not lie idle either and summoned his shadow clone. But he was cautious this time and manipulated the shadow clone into putting on his clothes. After pulling the hood over its head, it even put on a white mask for additional security. Yang Xiaojun had reminded him about this in the past. Since he did not want to expose the fact that he had a shadow clone, he had to disguise it as a person. At this moment, the shadow clone looked just like a normal human being with the clothes and mask on. Meanwhile, Ren Xiaosu pulled his own hood over his head and lay quietly in the grass. Then Ren Xiaosu saw the film crew he had left behind earlier finally arrive at the tunnel entrance. These people were really bold. Was this a place normal people should be coming to? The director said, "It's right here. Set up the equipment quickly." The dozen-odd members of the film crew got down to work. Some of them set up the cameras while others laid out the dolly tracks. Someone even brought a camping chair for the director to use. A person in the film crew said, sounding somewhat afraid, "Director, will it really be safe here? My wife's about to give birth. I don't want anything to happen to me." The director barked, "Hey, don't jinx it. Don't you know that you shouldn't say such things in our line of work?" Ren Xiaosu was speechless. Nearby, one of the crew members said hesitantly, "But the people here are all very dangerous." The director said scornfully, "This is art. Do you know what art is? Without the spirit of dedication to art, how are we supposed to make a wonderful documentary?" "Director, you never said anything about making a documentary before. We've always been shooting commercial films," a crew member muttered. "Great ideas are often born in a split second." The director said proudly, "Think about it. The world has already started changing, hasn't it? Has there been anyone who's made a documentary about real superhumans before? At the most, we've had real superhumans getting cast in movies. But think about what we are doing now. We're going to present this magical, wild world to the audience to show them what the real world of superhumans is like. Don't you guys think this idea is so exciting it'll make people sleepless? Once the documentary is completed, my name will go down in history." Off to the side in the grass, Ren Xiaosu curled his lips. He could only hope the film crew would stay away from him and his shadow clone. As for filming the documentary, they would first have to survive before they could talk about that. Watching more and more people heading into the tunnel, Ren Xiaosu stayed stationary. After all, his goal was to capture a member of the Pyro Company for Zhou Yingzhu to complete her mission, not get his hands on some laboratory data. Right now, Ren Xiaosu only wanted to help Zhou Yingzhu join the Anjing house. He would be happy just to achieve this goal. Furthermore, while the laboratory data was probably worth a lot of money, those who managed to get their hands on it would still have to make their way out from the only exit, wouldn't they? As such, Ren Xiaosu felt that there was nothing wrong with him biding his time out here. Chapter 537 Late Caves In. The film crew had set up their cameras to face the entrance of the dark tunnel. As more and more people headed inside, a growing number of people also started gathering and lying in wait in the thicket outside. Surprisingly, the director grabbed his microphone and went around interviewing some of the people lying in the grass. It looked like he was searching for supernatural beings within the crowd. But when he skipped past Ren Xiaosu, someone asked the director, "Why didn't you interview that young man just now? He doesn't look strong at all. I can tell at a glance that he's not a superhuman," the director said. Then the director spotted the shadow clone not far away from them. When he saw the shadow clone in the white mask, his eyes lit up. "Hurry up, let's interview him. That man looks really strong." Ren Xiaosu was left speechless as he lay in the grass. The initially tense atmosphere was suddenly mixed with an element of absurdity due to the arrival of the film crew. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu saw the mob bosses he had made friends with at the spa center run over. Seeing that they were about to enter the tunnel without even thinking, Ren Xiaosu couldn't help himself from stopping them. "Zheng Hongning, get over here." Zheng Hongning was pleased to see Ren Xiaosu. "Dr. Ren, you came here too. Why didn't you go inside?" Ren Xiaosu beckoned to them. "Don't go inside yet, let's just watch for a bit." "What's there to see? If we watch any longer, all the research data will be seized by others," Zheng Hongning said. Ren Xiaosu glanced at him. "Do you think it's that easy to get a hold of the research data? Just wait and see. Those people who manage to get their hands on the research data will still have to exit from the tunnel through here anyway." Upon Ren Xiaosu's observation, Zheng Hongning facepalmed. "Oh, that's true." As they spoke, another several dozen people joined them in the overgrowth outside the tunnel. What Ren Xiaosu found curious was that he did not see anyone from the Pyro Company and the riders enter the tunnel since he got here. Could it be that the Pyro Company and the riders had given up on the research data when they saw so many people arriving? Or could it be that this was just a conspiracy as he had guessed? Then, a text alert sounded from Ren Xiaosu's pocket. When he looked up at the others, he saw more than 20 people among the now nearly a 100-member crowd in the grass take out their cell phones as well. The lights on the cell phones looked like fireflies fluttering around in the grass. Ren Xiaosu looked at the text message and was surprised to see the Anjing house had suddenly changed their mind. They had sent a reminder to all hitmen to not act rashly, and that everyone should watch and wait outside the tunnel. Although the Anjing house did not state the reason for this, everyone was overwhelmed with doubt by this sudden announcement. Suddenly, someone stood up holding a cell phone in his hand and said, "Whoever owns a cell phone here is probably a contract killer from the Anjing house, and my guess is that not everyone here is A rank. There should be some of you who are still B and C rank, so I feel that we lower-ranking hitmen should work together to hunt down the members of the Pyro Company. That way, our chances of succeeding will be greater. Those of us with cell phones." The person speaking was a B rank hitman. Knowing that he would be promoted to A rank soon, he was also getting a little ambitious at qualifying for the Anjing house trials. However, he was not confident of killing the Pyro Company members by himself. As such, he tried to urge everyone here to attack the enemy together. It wasn't only the A-rank hitmen who had gathered here, a large number of local B and C rank hitmen also who wanted to take advantage of the situation. After all, regardless of whether they could qualify for the trials next year, they would still receive a reward for killing the Pyro Company members today. However, his speech ended up reminding Ren Xiaosu instead. That was right, there were more than 20 cell phones here. While the B-rank hitman was speaking, he suddenly saw a hooded figure wearing a white mask get up from the grass and walk over to knock him unconscious. Not mentioning the Pyro Company, the Anjing house's mission broadcast this time had gathered all of these hitmen with cell phones in one place, giving Ren Xiaosu a chance to capture them in one fell swoop. Nobody had expected such a turn of events. Why was this person suddenly snatching the cell phone of others without warning? Weren't they just talking about working together to kill the Pyro Company members? Watching the shadow clone attacking the hitmen, Zheng Hongning suddenly sighed next to Ren Xiaosu. "How I wish I was a powerful superhuman like that guy." Ren Xiaosu said modestly without a care while watching the tunnel entrance, "He's not really that powerful." But when Zheng Hongning heard this, he said to Ren Xiaosu solemnly, "Dr. Ren, I know you're young and energetic, but admitting that others are powerful can also be a sign of self-confidence. Ren Xiaosu realized he had said something wrong. He responded humbly by reflex, but Zheng Hongning did not know the shadow clone belonged to him. All of a sudden, loud explosions rang out in the tunnel. In an instant, smoke and fire spewed out of the tunnel like a sandstorm. Smoke and dust were blasted out by the huge explosions in the tunnel, and some of those who had just gone into the tunnel were immediately blown several dozen meters into the air. Off to the side, the film crew's cameras happened to record this shocking scene. The loud explosions jolted the entire stronghold awake. However, that was not all. Amid the explosions, a sound resembling the crackling of a glacier came from the tunnel as well. Ren Xiaosu mumbled, "The tunnel's gonna collapse." As soon as he finished speaking, the tunnel, which had existed since before the cataclysm, suddenly caved in. Ren Xiaosu realized the Pyro Company was actually using this tunnel as a counterattack against the Anjing house. If they had not carefully planted explosives at each of the load-bearing points of the tunnel, it would have been impossible to destroy the tunnel in an instant. A huge whirlpool suddenly appeared on the surface of East Lake, and a flood of water gushed into every corner of the tunnel. However, no screams came from inside the tunnel. The sound of the tunnel collapsing, the explosions, and the current devouring the tunnel had completely drowned out the screams of those inside. In the blink of an eye, several hundred human lives in the tunnel were snuffed out. It was as quick as a comet burning through the sky. The Anjing house had tried to conspire against the Pyro Company. With just a text, several hundred people had been attracted here to interfere with the Pyro Company's plans and bring ridicule to their secret operation. But the Pyro Company was not dumb. They also made use of the scheme the Anjing house had hatched to finish off these few hundred people who had ulterior motives and leave them dead at the bottom of East Lake. The director of the film crew was stupefied by the happenings. Compared to the wild world that should have been all about jewels and romances, this was completely unlike his expectations. The wild world that was playing out in front of him could only be described as brutal. He had seen those people entering the tunnel with his own eyes, and their cameras even captured shots of them. But just a short while later, the people who had passed him were all dead. Ren Xiaosu recalled that he had not seen anyone from the Pyro Company or the riders this entire time. Perhaps the Anjing house had also realized this, so they sent out a text to inform everyone to watch and wait outside the tunnel. However, the text had come too late. Chapter 538 A Jack of all trades Doctor. East Lake was caving in. No, to be precise, East Lake would return to its original calm appearance in time. However, the tunnel that was from before the cataclysm had caved in. When Ren Xiaosu saw this sight, he felt like he was looking at a civilization that was about to disappear. Perhaps warring and plotting among humans might really be an eternal theme. But before he could get too emotional about this, Ren Xiaosu saw some people surround them from outside the tunnel. He could vaguely see that they were wielding black ceramic sabers as they approached, looking like they were planning to encircle the group of people lying here in the grass. Ren Xiaosu realized this was probably the Pyro Company's follow-up plan. They were looking to establish the dominance over those who tried to mess with them. In the past, it was only the Anjing house and the saboteurs that were at odds with the Pyro Company. However, it was a little different this time. The Anjing house had attracted so many underworld criminals with just a text message, and this made the Pyro Company feel threatened. The Pyro Company knew they had to let the entire criminal underworld understand that it was not going to be easy to seize something of theirs. The Pyro Company did not intend to communicate this to the underworld criminals in a proper setting. They firmly believed that as long as they massacred this disorderly mob and terrified them, no one would dare to respond to the call of the Anjing house in the future. At the very least, they should consider whether they were qualified before joining in on the action. Men died for money, and birds died for food. This saying was just like a reflection of tonight's events. It wasn't until this moment that the people who came to steal the Pyro Company's laboratory data realized how ruthless the opponent was. But it was too late. The 30 people encircling him suddenly made their move. In the blink of an eye, the encirclement perimeter shrank further. When the nearly 100 people in the grass saw the situation was getting unfavorable, they dispersed and attempted to break out of the encirclement. However, the members of the Pyro Company were extremely ferocious. When anyone tried to get past them, they would quickly block the getaway and stab them with sabers. Not only that, at least 40 Pyro Company members were hiding in Stronghold 73 prior to the battle. In the distance, a sniper had started taking down the Pyro Company members. It seemed the Anjing house was starting to fight back. However, the sniper only managed to get 2 shots off before he let out a cry and was killed. In turn, that member of the Pyro Company's Dusk Squad who finished off the sniper was killed with a fine metallic needle that penetrated through his skull. The elderly sugar painter was sitting beside Vanilla with his aluminum plate spread out in front of him, along with a stove and a metal pot. As the sugar cubes reduced into an amber liquid in the red-hot metal pot, the old man waved his hand over the aluminum plate and painted a dragon that came alive and stood close guard next to Vanilla. These two people had formed a tacit agreement to work together. One would paint a dragon to protect the team while the other focused on manipulating metal to finish off the enemy. When the first amber dragon appeared, the old man wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "Can't you inform me in advance next time? Don't make it so hasty for me. I need some time to cast my power." Vanilla replied with a smile, "Well, you still managed to get it done, didn't you?" As he spoke, he opened the silver box he was carrying that contained 24 tailor-made long metal needles. With a flick of his finger, 12 long metal needles flew up and floated in front of him, searching for targets. The long needles shot out as though they had detected something, and a person cried out in pain in the darkness. Vanilla killed one of the Pyro Company's combatants lurking in the vicinity. In the darkness nearby, more members of the Pyro Company appeared. Some of them had crawled out from the river, and they had gill-like features growing at their jowls. This was likely what allowed them to breathe underwater. These people were the ones who had detonated the tunnel with explosives, and it could be said that the cave-in at East Lake was their doing. Now that they had completed their mission, they would have to come out of the water to join their teammates in battle. However, Ren Xiaosu was at a loss. Could they still be considered human? Had the Pyro Company's genetic modifications already reached a stage where they could even change the characteristics of a species? Seeing that close to 100 members of the Pyro Company had already appeared, Ren Xiaosu wondered if there really were a research laboratory in Stronghold 73. Did the Pyro Company really come here with the intention to search for the research laboratory, or had they chosen a location that was most beneficial for the scheme they had been plotting for so long against the Anjing house? The Anjing house sent out another text. Reward increase. Any hitman within the encirclement that manages to kill a Pyro Company member will receive double the reward. Ren Xiaosu frowned when he saw the text. As a matter of fact, within the encirclement, he was probably the only one who could receive texts from the Anjing house. His shadow clone was still holding onto the cell phones it had snatched from the others. The Anjing house probably didn't expect the group text they sent would end up as a one-on-one chat with Ren Xiaosu. Right after, the Anjing house's A-rank hitmen appeared out of nowhere and attacked this group of amphibious monsters from the Pyro Company. The A-rank hitmen must have been outstanding to get promoted to this rank, and that was probably why they did not rush into the tunnel earlier. As chaos erupted everywhere, a mob boss like Zheng Hongning could only feel at a loss. This was no longer a battlefield they could control. Like what they had said, this world had already changed beyond their comprehension. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the aureole behind. In this chaotic battle, it was no longer clear who the cicada was, who the mantis was, and who the aureole was. That verdict would only be reached at the end of the battle. Only those with more trump cards would emerge victorious from this. The scent of blood was starting to fill the air in the area of the thicket as more and more people got killed. While Zheng Hongning and the other mob bosses were thinking about what to do, they suddenly heard Dr. Ren say in a low voice, "Follow me if you want to live." As soon as he finished, Ren Xiaosu rushed off in the southwest direction. That was where an opening had been created by the Anjing house sniper earlier. Zheng Hongning and the others had no time to think, so they ran out with Ren Xiaosu. But before they could get past the encirclement, the Pyro Company had already tightened the perimeter. Zheng Hongning felt a tinge of despair. "Dr. Ren, what do we do now? What are you panicking for?" Ren Xiaosu said coldly. 8 members of the Pyro Company sneered as they charged. But before they could get to Ren Xiaosu, a figure wearing a white mask suddenly appeared from the side and grabbed the neck of one of the Pyro Company's members like lightning. The figure dashed forward in an extremely aggressive manner. Zheng Hongning and the others were stunned. Why did it feel like this superhuman Zheng Hongling was envious of and had just stolen a bunch of cell phones was deliberately protecting Dr. Ren? They looked quietly at the back of the young man standing in front of them and felt like they had underestimated him. However, why was Dr. Ren taking pictures non-stop with the cell phones as they ran for their lives? Zheng Hongling asked in panic, Dr. Ren, this isn't the time to be messing with your cell phones. Put it away and escape. Stop checking on texts from the Anjing house. Ren Xiaosu said strangely, I'm not checking for texts, I'm taking pictures. Each kill is worth hundreds of thousands of yuan, even up to 1 million yuan. This is all money. I have to take pictures as evidence to show that they were killed by me and my friend here, old Zhu. Zheng Hongling was at a loss for words. Why was he still thinking about money at this time? He asked, but aren't you a doctor? Ren Xiaosu said with a grin, I'm a jack of all trades. Chapter 539 Lame. The battlefield could no longer be described as just an encirclement. No one knew how many people were fighting in this chaotic battle. There were the Anjing House's own members, the Anjing House A-rank hitmen, the Pyro Company members, and people from the various forces that came to seize the laboratory data. As everyone fought one another, hostile and friendly forces could hardly be differentiated. Ren Xiaosu was very decisive in breaking through the encirclement. Initially, the Pyro Company members planned to come over to attack him when they saw him killing their teammates. However, they realized Ren Xiaosu and his group were too determined to get away. The Pyro Company member commanding the battle said calmly on their frequency, let them leave. For the Pyro Company, tonight's operation was to establish the dominance. They didn't need to fight to the death with 1 or 2 superhumans. Besides, it was obvious these opponents were not to be trifled with. Since they wanted to leave, they should just let them go. But just as he finished speaking, someone suddenly said on the radio, he's back again. The commander frowned. How many of them? Only 2. One of them is a hooded young man whose face we can't see clearly, and the other is wearing a white mask, someone reported on the radio. The commander said, send out another Dusk squad to surround them. Before he could finish speaking, the person speaking on the radio reported, they've left again. The commander of the Pyro Company was at a loss for words. What were their opponents doing? They were coming and going as they pleased. However, this also inadvertently showed they were powerless to stop the other party now. The commander said coldly on the radio, ignore them. Just do your best to cause casualties. What we need to achieve is making the tragic news spread so these people won't dare to come and cause us any more trouble in the future. The objective of the Pyro Company was to eventually make the outside world know they would have to pay the price for coming here. As for what happened in between, it would not affect the big picture. Since there were only a couple enemies, and there wasn't any real laboratory site in the tunnel, they were really not afraid of them causing any trouble. Just a moment ago, Ren Xiaosu, Zheng Hongling, and the others stopped in their tracks after breaking through the encirclement. Ren Xiaosu had wanted to lure some of the Pyro Company members to pursue them by manipulating his shadow clone to kill efficiently. This way, he would only need to face a small portion of the Pyro Company members himself. Not only could he earn the rewards this way, but he could also capture 1 or 2 of them for Zhou Yingzhu to complete her mission. But he suddenly realized the Pyro Company members had stopped pursuing them. Ren Xiaosu got anxious. He told Zheng Hongling, if there's nothing else for you, get out of Stronghold 73, quick. The Zhou Consortium's troops will probably arrive soon. You can see the situation here for yourself, and it's not something that you can handle, so just go back to the black market. Come on, old Zhu, let's go. After saying that, Ren Xiaosu returned to the battlefield with his shadow clone. This was the first incident of Ren Xiaosu's return to the battlefield that was reported on the Pyro Company's radio frequency. But midway through, Ren Xiaosu felt that he had forgotten something. As such, he turned back and stopped Zheng Hongling and the others. Y'all haven't thanked me yet. Zheng Hongling and the others looked at Ren Xiaosu with stunned expressions like they were looking at a monster. He was coming and going on the battlefield as he liked at this fucking time just so he could get him to thank him. Thank you. Thank you. Ren Xiaosu looked at the typewriter in the palace typing out several lines of words on leather parchment for the gratitude tokens he had earned before returning to the battlefield with much satisfaction. Although he was still far from unlocking his new weapon, requiring 10,000 gratitude tokens for that. A penny saved was a penny earned. Honestly, he was quite looking forward to the third weapon getting unlocked. Be it his black saber or black sniper rifle, they proved to be extremely useful to him, helping him a great deal in critical moments. The reason why Ren Xiaosu chose to return to the battlefield was partly also because of money. But more importantly, didn't the Anjing House say that only A-rank hitmen who could kill a member of the Pyro Company for this mission would have a chance of participating in next year's trials? Ren Xiaosu suddenly thought of something. Almost all of the A-rank hitmen who could participate in the trials next year were already here. However, he definitely could not kill them. Otherwise, both the Anjing House and the Pyro Company would probably start hunting him down together. Although he could not kill the A-rank hitmen, he could stop them from getting any Pyro Company kills. As long as these A-rank hitmen failed to complete their missions successfully, they would lose the qualification to participate in next year's trials. Someone in town once told a story about an evil dragon that only ate the girls in a village. The village selected the most skilled hero to kill the dragon, but the hero still believed he could not defeat it. So he simply made sure the girls became women, and that starved the dragon to death. Everyone regarded this as a joke. However, this method was similar to what Ren Xiaosu was planning. It was also known as solving the root of the problem. At this moment, the film crew was shivering in fright as the Pyro Company members walked towards them. In the end, it was the director who was bravest. He forced himself to calm down and said, "Hi, we're the film crew from Awesome Media. We're just here to do some filming and have no intention of interfering in your dispute, so can you please let us go?" The Dusk combatant facing them did not make a decision on his own. He looked at the film crew's equipment and asked on the radio, "Commander, there's a film crew shooting a video here. They said they're from Awesome Media. Should we kill them?" The commander gave it some thought and said coldly, "Confiscate their equipment and let them go. These people still have some influence across the various strongholds, and they're often featured in newspapers. By letting them leave, they can also help us publicize what happened here." The Dusk combatant standing in front of the film crew looked at the director. "You're the director, right? You guys can leave, but we definitely won't allow you to take your equipment with you. Take a good look around at this purgatory and go tell the world that this isn't all fun and games. In the modern day, you'll get yourselves killed if you involve yourselves in other people's business." As he was speaking, the Dusk combatant's expression suddenly changed. He heard a gust of wind behind him and instinctively backflipped into the air. At the same time, he used the black ceramic saber in his hand and slashed at whatever was behind him. Everything happened in a split second, so the film crew did not even manage to see his movements clearly. However, the attacker was even faster than him. Before the Dusk combatant could slash the attacker's black saber had already sliced down onto him. When the two black sabers struck each other, the black ceramic saber the Dusk combatant was holding was cleanly severed like a candle being cut in two. Ren Xiaosu slashed his black saber diagonally across his enemy's chest, and he also forcefully cut through the bulletproof vest. Ren Xiaosu looked at the corpse of the Dusk combatant and sneered, "Lame." Dumbfounded, the director gazed at the young man in front of him whose face was half hidden by the shadow of his hood. He suddenly got a little excited. This was probably the wild world he had been searching for. Chapter 540 The cauldron has gotten a little larger. While the director was momentarily stunned, Ren Xiaosu took out a cell phone and snapped a picture of the corpse on the ground. However, Ren Xiaosu did this without attracting any attention. He would switch to a different cell phone after completing a mission with one. He absolutely did not use the same identity to receive the reward twice. After all, the cell phones he had just stolen today were taken from B and C rank hitmen. It would already be very impressive for these hitmen to kill a member of the Pyro Company. If he killed too many of them, it would easily arouse the suspicions of the Anjing House. However, Ren Xiaosu did not realize this would give a false impression to the Anjing House. The mission dispatcher thought there was still a lot of their people left on the battlefield, and they felt terrific about it. The mission dispatcher asked on their frequency, "How is everything over there? Have you guys killed those amphibious monsters yet?" Vanilla loosened his tie. "Soon. Alright, don't worry, our hitmen on the battlefield are all very impressive. There's still a lot of them, and they've killed many of the pyro company. Vanilla heaved a sigh of relief. That's good. Have you seen Boss? No, Boss went out into the wilderness to intercept the pyro company's reinforcements by herself, so she can't make it over, the mission dispatcher said. Vanilla whistled. The boss is amazing. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu was about to leave after he finished taking photos to search for his next target. However, someone caught up to him and said, "Bro, can you give me your contact info? My name is Mu Wonge." When Ren Xiaosu turned around, he saw the director from earlier. The moment he came to speak to him, Ren Xiaosu was reminded of something he nearly forgot about. Rather than asking the director for his gratitude, he retrieved the film roll from the crew's equipment and destroyed it. After all, the film crew had been filming really close to him earlier, so who knew if their camera had captured his image. Mu Wonge was stunned. My film. Ren Xiaosu turned around and looked at him. Mu Wonge immediately stopped talking about the film roll. Can I invite you to star in my next movie? The main reason for this invitation was that the figure of Ren Xiaosu slashing his saber kept replaying in his mind. As the director was really into the visual arts, he found the scene from earlier spectacular. However, Ren Xiaosu looked at him with a puzzled expression before turning around to continue searching for his target. Invite him to act in a movie? What bullshit. Besides, it was still a question whether this director would make it out of here alive. At this moment, an injured A-rank hitman was fleeing for his life with a member of Dusk pursuing close behind. As the rustle of his footsteps on the grass and his heavy breathing amplified, the A-rank hitman could no longer hear the surrounding gunfire and shouting on the chaotic battlefield. He had never felt so tired before. He just wanted to lie down in the grass and fall into a deep sleep forever, without having to care about these struggles for fame and status. However, his pursuer behind him was still getting closer. He still did not want to die. Just as the Dusk member was about to catch up to him, he suddenly heard a scream behind him. The A-rank hitman turned around and saw a hooded young man slicing the main artery of the enemy's neck in an instant. The Dusk member did not seem to have a chance of fighting back at all in the face of this young man, with even his ceramic saber easily severed in half. He wanted to go over and thank him, but he saw another figure in a white mask emerging from the side and snatching away the Dusk member's body. The A-rank hitman was stunned. The reward had been snatched. Before he could say anything, the young man who saved him was already running far away in pursuit of the figure that stole the reward. From the beginning to the end, the A-rank hitman was left absolutely confused. He did not even know who had saved him. Another A-rank hitman was pursuing a lone Dusk member who had been shot and would not be able to run far. Seeing that he was about to qualify for the trials next year, a hooded figure in a white mask suddenly dashed out from the vicinity and knocked out the Dusk member he was pursuing. Then the hooded figure turned around and ran away carrying the Dusk member. The A-rank hitman was stunned by the turn of events unfolding before his eyes. Before he could even react, the shadow clone had already run far away. Fuck, the A-rank hitman was furious. It was not easy for him to find this lone pyro company member, yet he had been robbed of a kill just like that. An A-rank hitman had just ended his battle, and the corpse of a Dusk member was lying in front of him. Just as he was about to snap a picture to complete his mission, a figure in a white mask suddenly rushed out. The A-rank hitman raised the gun in his right hand and fired, but his opponent's target was not him at all. When he saw the figure in the white mask speeding by, the A-rank hitman fired another 2 shots in a row. However, his opponent seemed completely unscathed. The A-rank hitman was getting a little flustered. Why did he have to encounter a monster that was not afraid of bullets in this place? But just as he stepped back and prepared to use his superpower, his opponent ran far away. When the A-rank hitman looked down, he discovered that the Dusk member he had just killed had disappeared. The A-rank hitman stared at the shadow clone's receding figure as it left. What the fuck? He could not understand why his opponent was not hunting his own targets and had to come steal his prey even though he was clearly so skillful. It even felt like he was invulnerable to attacks. How nasty could he get? Throughout, Ren Xiaosu played the good guy while Old Zhu took the blame. In any case, Zheng Hongning, who knew that Ren Xiaosu and Old Zhu were friends, was probably fleeing back to the black market right now.
Since Zheng Hongning and the others did not have any interactions with the Anjing House and the Pyro Company, Ren Xiaosu was not afraid of anyone finding out about his scheme. But so what if they knew? He had already stolen the corpses anyway. Similar incidents like this happened frequently on the chaotic battlefield. Ren Xiaosu had wanted to take a few more corpses, but the Zhou Consortium's troops had suddenly surrounded the battlefield. Although there was a rather loud commotion when the Pyro Company blew up the East Lake Tunnel, the Zhou Consortium apparently feigned ignorance about it. They did not care at all about how many people would die here. It was not until the forces on the battlefield were indistinguishable from one another that they finally arrived. Even amid the chaos on the battlefield, no one wanted to face the regular army of an organization. The garrison force in Stronghold 73 had at least 4,500 soldiers, which represented an entire brigade strength. No matter how powerful a supernatural being was, or how reputable the criminals were in the underworld, it would be impossible for them to take on a brigade. Moreover, everyone was very sure by now that there wasn't any laboratory data in the East Lake Tunnel, so why would they still stay around? The Pyro Company and the Anjing House were the first to withdraw. Ren Xiaosu felt that the Pyro Company had gained a slight upper hand in this conflict. Although the Pyro Company had suffered greater casualties than the Anjing House due to Ren Xiaosu's presence, not too many people would be willing to take part in the conflicts between the Anjing House and the Pyro Company in the future. The Anjing House could no longer take advantage and garner support from other forces. Ren Xiaosu also pulled out of the battlefield. But throughout the battle, he had several doubts on his mind. First, he never saw any of the riders enter the battlefield, and second, he did not encounter his old acquaintance, Wang Congdiang. Did Wang Congdiang die in the tunnel? No, how could someone like Wang Congdiang, who was such a terrible person, enter the East Lake Tunnel rashly? Ren Xiaosu had a feeling that this battle in Stronghold 73 would continue. After all, the Anjing House and the Pyro Company still had energy to spare. However, this had nothing to do with him anymore. Since he had captured a member of the Pyro Company like he wanted to, he would head back and let Zhou Yingzu complete her mission. It was not that Ren Xiaosu did not want to stay, but that he could not continue staying. After all, he had stolen too many of the Anjing House's cell phones and snatched all of the targets from the A-rank hitmen. Furthermore, he also killed a lot of the Pyro Company's members. Once the other parties gave these matters a think when the chaotic battle concluded, they would realize all the things he had done. At that time, it would not be surprising if the two organizations teamed up to hunt down Old Zhu. The surface of East Lake had calmed, and it was sparkling in the moonlight that shone down from above. After the chaotic battle was over, it was as though no one cared about the hundreds of lives buried overnight at the bottom of the lake. Actually, what more people were thinking about was whether there was really a Pyro Company research laboratory in Stronghold 73. Zhu Xianchu, who was far away at Fortress 178, was pondering his superpower. Next to him, Zhou Yinglong snapped at him, "Put away your cauldron already. Why do you keep showing it off?" However, when Zhou Yinglong realized that Zhu Xianchu looked startled, he quickly said, "I was just kidding." However, Zhu Xianchu asked, feeling puzzled, "Do you think my cauldron just got a little larger?" Zhou Yinglong thought that Zhu Xianchu was showing off to him again. Get lost. Chapter 541 The Dust Settles. After leaving Stronghold 73, Ren Xiaosu did not care about what would happen in the stronghold. While he was on his way to join back up with his maidservant, the Anjing House was still issuing missions to deal with the Pyro Company through their text messages. From that, it could be seen that the battle in Stronghold 73 did not end with the cave-in at East Lake. However, 2 days later, the Anjing House finally stopped sending out any further texts with regards to Stronghold 73. Thus, Ren Xiaosu concluded the battle should have completely ended and that the Anjing House and the Pyro Company would be withdrawing from Stronghold 73. As for whether there was truly any laboratory data at the site, Ren Xiaosu suddenly had a feeling there should be. This was because he did not see any of the riders since the chaotic battle broke out. After all, finding the research laboratory had been the goal from the start for that group of people. But once the battle began, they went missing. This had to be because they had gone to search for the true location of the laboratory. Moreover,
Ren Xiaosu felt the riders and the Pyro Company only shared the same goal but were not truly united in their cause. If there were no laboratory there, the Pyro Company would not have been able to convince the riders to show up. Therefore, it was probably also in the Pyro Company's plan for the riders to head straight for the laboratory while they plotted and fought to the death against the Anjing house. A corpse of a Pyro Company member was in Ren Xiaosu's storage space that he prepared for Zhou Yingzhu to complete her mission. The two of them were discussing how to pose the body so it would look more natural. But then, the Anjing house sent out a text, due to an unexpected person deliberately breaking the rules. The requirement of killing the Pyro Company members to qualify for next year's trials has been rescinded. Qualification for the trials will still be determined by the completion of 5 A-rank missions within the year. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. He had fucking spent so much effort to help Zhou Yingzhu disqualify the other A-rank hitmen, but in the end, this text from the Anjing house had made his work all for nothing. Ren Xiaosu was a little angry. How could a large organization like that not have the most basic form of credibility? When Zhou Yingzhu saw the text, she looked up at Ren Xiaosu and asked, "Master, what exactly did you do in Stronghold 73? In the blink of an eye, Zhou Yingzhu realized the person in the text who broke the rules must have been her master and not anyone else. Ren Xiaosu's face darkened. "Is that the kind of person you see me as?" "Yes, absolutely," Zhou Yingzhu said with certainty. Ren Xiaosu was speechless. This time, Ren Xiaosu had overplayed his hand. The Anjing house had more than 30 A-rank hitmen show up at Stronghold 73. Minus the 11 who died, there was still 26 of them remaining. But of the 26, only 2 managed to qualify for the trials next year. If there had been more than 5 hitmen who completed this mission, the Anjing house would probably not have gone back on their word. It was purely because of Ren Xiaosu's meddling that they were forced to rescind their own rules, and that was not something the Anjing house wanted either. When Ren Xiaosu came back to the hotel, it seemed he had been noticed by someone in the tour group. Not long after his return, Li Ran actually came over to look for Zhou Yingzhu. She forced Zhou Yingzhu to chat with her for 2 hours straight before leaving, which nearly drove Zhou Yingzhu crazy. Ren Xiaosu chuckled and said, "Looks like the relationship between you two improved a lot while I was away." Zhou Yingzhu rolled her eyes. "She obviously came to see you, master." "Oh yes," Ren Xiaosu took out a bunch of cell phones and said, "All these cell phones have completed the mission with 1 or 2 Pyro Company member kills on them. Go and calculate how much reward money we can get from these." Zhou Yingzhu stared blankly at the 20+ cell phones in front of her. She could roughly understand why the Anjing house had rescinded the rule. "Master, didn't they say that only 40 people from the Pyro Company were there? Yet you have more than 20 cell phones here." "There were more than 40 of them." Ren Xiaosu shook his head and said, "I think over 80 Pyro Company members showed up. The Anjing house's intelligence report gave the wrong info." Only after Ren Xiaosu explained everything to Zhou Yingzhu did she realize her master's trip to Stronghold 73 was really dangerous. "Good thing you didn't go into the tunnel," Zhou Yingzhu rejoiced. "However, the Pyro Company and the Anjing house aren't easy to deal with at all. I just hope we won't be dragged in again the next time they fight." Zhou Yingzhu picked up the cell phones Ren Xiaosu had handed her one by one and counted the reward money earned. There's 15 midnight and 6 dusk member kills in total. Originally, a reward of 150,000 yuan was offered for each midnight member killed and 500,000 yuan for each dusk member killed. However, the Anjing house suddenly doubled the reward money, so we have a total of 10.5 million yuan. Zhou Yingzhu beamed in delight. As a matter of fact, her share of this 10.5 million yuan reward would be more than 2 million yuan. All she did was lie around the hotel with nothing to do and money still came to her. Where else was she supposed to find another master like that? The Anjing house will definitely notice that there's something suspicious with this batch of cell phones. After all, there were not that many Pyro Company members killed by the A-rank hitmen, yet this group of B and C-rank hitmen seem to be playing in God mode or something. It's clear that there's something strange going on. Ren Xiaosu asked, "I think that these accounts might have been placed under surveillance. How can we safely transfer the money out?" Zhou Yingzhu explained, "That won't be difficult. The most straightforward and crude way would be to go to the casino in Luoyang City and transfer the money using the anonymous account's passwords.
The casino will then exchange the money for chips that you can either deposit into your new account or take with you. That casino should be owned by the Qinghai Group, so there's a lot of privacy. Although there's an administrative fee, I think it's absolutely worth it. Ren Xiaosu frowned. Even if it's the Qinghai Group, we can't completely place our trust in them. They might have a good reputation, but we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes. Don't worry. Zhou Yingzhu shook her head. The other consortiums tried to pressure the casino into freezing some accounts. But the casinos did not bow to the pressure of those consortiums and only took orders from the Qinghai Group. We'll talk about it when we get back. Ren Xiaosu said, record these accounts and passwords first, then delete the texts and find an opportunity to sell this batch of cell phones. That'll be another lump sum earned. We can sell these off in the local black markets. If we sell them in batches at the various strongholds, we won't need to sell them at too low a price. Zhou Yingzhu was absolutely nailing her role as the support teammate right now. Ren Xiaosu did not know much about the Central Plains, so with a former intelligence officer like Zhou Yingzhu by his side, he could learn more about how things worked here. Where we going next? Ren Xiaosu asked. Our next stop will be Stronghold 73, where we'll stay for 4 days while Li Ran attends an audition. After that, we'll head to Stronghold 74 for another concert, Zhou Yingzhu said. Ren Xiaosu was speechless. Did Stronghold 73 have some sort of grudge against him? This was the 3rd time he'd be going to Stronghold 73. Hopefully, the storm at Stronghold 73 would have subsided by the time they got there. Chapter 542 Debriefing. Since it was a concert tour, there were concerts scheduled. However, Ren Xiaosu still took time to relax amid the frantic schedule. While the others in the group were busy up to their ears, he stayed in the hotel and read. Fang Ji, Li Ran's assistant, wanted Ren Xiaosu to go to the concert venue to help out, but Ren Xiaosu mercilessly rejected him. At this moment, a Pyro Company fighting force was convening a meeting to analyze the battle at Stronghold 73. An after-action review was an extremely important process for all military commanders. It was just like how students specifically kept a notebook to record their mistakes to remind themselves not to repeat the same errors. In the dark conference room, everyone was sitting upright. This place did not really look like your usual conference room. It felt more like a prison instead. One of the attendees said, "We've successfully gotten our hands on the lab data this time. I have to say that Commander's plan of creating a diversion to secretly make our move was a wonderful strategy. Furthermore, Commander has also established our Pyro Company's dominance on that filth out there. They probably won't even think about going against us again in the future. I feel that this is really down to the great contribution of Commander." The Commander glanced at the person who spoke, then calmly said, "This is not the time to bootlick. I want a detailed report of the casualties we suffered." His adjutant next to him said, "We have 43 dead, 4 seriously injured, and 17 others who suffered minor injuries." The commander frowned and said, "The casualties are much worse than we expected. 1/3 of our casualties during this operation came from the elite Dusk unit. It was mainly because of that person in the white mask that we suffered so many casualties," the adjutant calmly encapsulated. "But compared to the casualties, HQ should be rewarding us for our success this time instead of punishing us." Everyone's eyes lit up. This meant they could obtain access to better gene mods as well as greater authority. The concept of authority within the Pyro Company was a measure of one's status. Currently, their commander only had P3 authority, with the P4 and P5 personnel outranking him. If he wanted to become a big shot like them, there was still a long way to go. The commander read through the battle summary and asked, "Who fought against that person in the white mask that day?" His adjutant replied, "This is where it gets a little strange. Those who fought against him are all dead, so it's difficult for us to even find out what the opponent's superpower is." Silence fell over the conference room. Anyone who had fought that person directly was dead, so that made it difficult to find out anything useful about the other party. The most useful information they had was that the other party was a masked male, with his gender determined via his height and physique. "Designate this person as AT4 threat," the commander said, "Report this information to HQ." Just as P1 to P5 represented the Pyro Company's internal authority levels, T represented the combat power of an individual,
or the threat that they posed. The previous person designated as a T4 threat was Li Shenton from the southwest. As for T5, no one was assessed to be at that threat level yet. However, the Pyro Company firmly believed that such a person would definitely appear in the era of gods. At the same time the Pyro Company was conducting its after-action review, the Anjing House was also having theirs. In a residential area, several people had gathered around a dining table and were discussing as they ate. We still have much to learn from our experience this time. Based on our assessment, the Pyro Company has already obtained the lab data with the help of the riders. However, the riders still haven't found what they wanted and have already returned to Luoyang City. What was unexpected that day was that the Pyro Company's infiltration methods were even more brilliant than we knew. Otherwise, we wouldn't have made the wrong assessment of how many people they had in the stronghold. Therefore, we must be more careful in the future. The Pyro Company is an extremely strong opponent, so don't underestimate them. Another thing is, someone kept using different cell phones to receive the rewards for the mission that day. This led to us getting the wrong impression of how many people had responded to our mission that day. We only learned later on that a person in a white mask that came to mess things up had stolen a bunch of C and B rank hitmen's cell phones before the battle broke out. Therefore, he was the one who killed over 20 of the Pyro Company members. Vanilla frowned as he listened to this. Only now did he say, he killed so many people single-handedly. Just how godly is he? Why is he so powerful? Do you have any more detailed information about him? His identity is unknown, but his height is estimated to be between 182 to 185 centimeters. According to the A-rank hitmen, he has an extremely strong physique, so it's very likely that he's a superhuman with extreme physical strength. A girl at the dining table touched her newly reground canine teeth and said, our A-rank hitmen didn't engage in combat with him directly, so the Pyro Company should have more information about him. This girl's canine teeth were a little strange looking. They were much longer than the other teeth she had and made her look like a vampire. Vanilla sat in his chair with his arms crossed and said, you have to keep an eye on this superhuman. Moving in and out of the chaotic battlefield so casually, it's like everything is just a game to him. The strength of a person like that is truly terrifying. The girl with the long canine teeth said, however, that person killed many of the Pyro Company's members for us. So the boss intends to pay out all the rewards so we can foster this relationship and continue observing him. Playing with sugar syrup next to them, the old man pursed his lips and said, how are we going to keep an eye on him? We don't know what he looks like, and he owns so many cell phones as well, so how are we going to track his movements? Do you know which cell phone he'll be using for the next mission? Wait a minute. The girl with the long canine teeth was stunned. There was also a D-rank hitman in Stronghold 61 who liked to steal the cell phones of the other hitmen. The boss even went down to Stronghold 61's town specifically to investigate. Could he be that person? Vanilla was at a loss. Do you really think that guy has nothing better to do and became a D-rank hitman? Why do I find it hard to believe? In fact, the Anjing House had also suspected Zhou Yingzhu before. After all, when she went to Stronghold 73 to kill Zhou Qilong, the D-rank hitmen over there were similarly wiped out. From the looks of it, the suspicions on Zhou Yingzhu could be eased for the time being as they had temporarily identified the suspect to be male. After all, Vanilla had seen Zhou Yingzhu before. With her figure, there was no way she could disguise herself as a man even with a mask on. In that chaotic battle, the man in the white mask had become the focus of the Pyro Company and the Anjing House after they sat down to analyze the situation. Everyone wanted to find him, but there weren't any good leads on where to start. The radiance of that white-masked man even concealed the role that Ren Xiaosu's original self had played on the battlefield. Just like that, Ren Xiaosu's participation that night had been ignored. Vanilla asked, can we investigate those anonymous accounts? As long as he tries to withdraw the money, we can find his whereabouts. We're already on that, but what I'm most worried about is that he'll go to the casino at the Qinghai Group to get the money out. If he does that, the last lead we have will be cut off. Chapter 543 Hope Media. It had already been a week since the cave-in at East Lake. Ren Xiaosu kept himself cooped up in the hotel every day as if he had nothing to do with that incident at all. However, Zhou Yingzhu remained very busy. As Li Ran's bodyguard, Zhou Yingzhu had to constantly be by Li Ran's side while she attended all sorts of events. For some reason, the media in the stronghold went crazy and started tracking Zhou Yingzhu as well. They even gave her the title of the most beautiful female bodyguard, which made her feel flattered for a few days. After several concerts, Li Ran was starting to look a little tired. However, before setting off on the journey to Stronghold 73, Li Ran did not board her own minivan. Instead, she got into Zhou Yingzhu and Ren Xiaosu's car. This surprised Ren Xiaosu a little. With Li Ran sitting in the same car as them, he couldn't speak casually anymore. After all, he was supposed to be Zhou Yingshui's assistant. Ren Xiaosu wondered, isn't it more comfortable for you to take the minivan? The seat in the minivan had been modified so it could be used as a bed for resting by reclining it fully. One could sleep through the entire journey and find themselves arriving at the destination when they woke up, so how much more enjoyable could it get? However, Li Ran gave a very good excuse. I'm worried we'll encounter danger in the wilderness, so I wanted to take the same car as my bodyguard. That way, if we encounter any danger, you guys can protect me immediately. Besides, any potential attacker would expect me to be in that minivan. If someone really attacks the convoy, they'll target the minivan first, and I'll be able to escape from danger. Ren Xiaosu said in a speechless manner, as if there's that many bandits targeting convoys in the wilderness of the Central Plains. However, Li Ran's reasoning was legitimate, so they couldn't really refuse to take her in their car. After they set off, Ren Xiaosu and Zhou Yingzhu remained silent. Li Ran was reading the newspaper in the backseat of the off-road vehicle, and she kept flipping through the newspaper noisily. Ren Xiaosu could not help but turn around and look. Li Ran immediately pretended to be reading the news seriously. However, Ren Xiaosu was surprised to find that the entire page facing him was full of news about Li Ran's successful performances. From the looks of it, it was even featured as the headliner. It was no wonder she was flipping the newspaper so noisily. So it turned out that she was trying to show off. The most eye-catching picture on the front page was Li Ran's photo. It was probably taken during one of her concerts as she was in her performance outfit that looked really dazzling. Ren Xiaosu turned back around and resumed resting with his eyes closed. Behind him, Li Ran coughed twice and said, "This newspaper from Hope Media is very influential and can be bought in all of the Zhou, Wang, and Kong consortium's strongholds. Also, I heard their newspaper is sold at all newsstands in the Pyro Company's strongholds." Zhou Yingzhu rolled her eyes as she drove. What this woman was obviously trying to say was that she was amazing for being able to get on the front page of such a newspaper. Yet Ren Xiaosu's interest was piqued by the other aspects of this discovery. What's up with this Hope Media? Which organization do they belong to? From his point of view, the various consortiums were still relatively isolated from one another. After all, if he wanted to go to the strongholds of the other consortiums, he would have to apply for a visa beforehand. So why was this Hope Media able to cast such a wide net? It is a business arm under the Qinghai Group. Li Ran smiled and said, "The last leg of our tour was set at Luoyang City because we also wanted to pay a visit to the chief editor of Hope Media." Ren Xiaosu was enlightened, so it was a business arm under the Qinghai Group. No wonder. A mouthpiece like a newspaper would have to adopt a neutral stance in order to be distributed in so many strongholds. It would be very difficult for the newspaper industry of the Wang Consortium to make any headway in the Zhou Consortium's strongholds. After all, a public opinion mouthpiece should not be influenced by external forces. Moreover, the Qinghai Group also owned more than half of the satellites in service to the Alliance of Strongholds. In terms of the speed of their news dissemination, they truly crushed all the other newspaper companies. The dissemination of news had always been focused on speed and accuracy. Whoever could deliver the news faster would have the advantage. Ren Xiaosu asked, "Can I have a look at the newspaper?" Li Ran was delighted on the inside, but she said in a reserved tone, "Of course." However, Li Ran was disappointed when Ren Xiaosu flipped through all the pages except for the entertainment section and the front page. He had to be intentionally ignoring her. That must be it. Zhou Yingzhu was amused. She knew full well that her master was not interested in entertainment news at all. After Ren Xiaosu finished reading today's newspaper, he went to get more of the previous day's newspapers that the entourage had stored and spent the entire day reading them.
Hope Media's newspaper was also quite ruthless. The current affairs pages were filled with articles that pointed out contemporary issues, with the Wang Consortium, Zhou Consortium, and Com Consortium all criticized. Not even the Pyro Company escaped their scathing opinion. Ren Xiaosu was puzzled. The chief editor of a newspaper like that hasn't been beaten to death yet. When Hope Media first started, people threatened them. However, the chief editor still continued writing this way. I heard he was kidnapped once and locked up for 3 days and 3 nights, and they broke his legs too. In the end, after he was released, the style of the newspaper's articles remained unchanged. Li Ran explained, after that, for some reason, everyone stopped caring about him. It's also because of Hope Media's truthful reporting that they were able to expand so rapidly. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. They actually did not kill the chief editor. Was it because the organizations still wanted to maintain their reputations? To be honest, he didn't really understand this. However, after reading so many newspapers, Ren Xiaosu became interested in Hope Media's publications, because just a few days' worth of newspapers had helped him learn a lot about the Central Plains. For example, the Wang Consortium and Fortress 178 had already signed a treaty on the construction and repair of the highways and railroads. Both parties had been preparing for this for a long time, and it was said that by the middle of next year, the highways would preliminarily be open to traffic. The full completion date, however, would have to wait another 5 years. From the looks of it, the Wang Consortium had a really urgent demand for resources from the northwest. In Hope Media's newspaper, there was also a report about the cave-in at East Lake. However, the reporter did not seem to know the entire story and only wrote about the reactions of the various consortiums. In his reading, Ren Xiaosu even saw reports about Luo Lan. However, the articles regarding the guy were basically all gossip. In the newspapers, the man seemed to be characterized as a nouveau riche from the southwest who had come to the Central Plains to enjoy life. However, at the end of the article, it was stated that perhaps Luo Lan's purpose in coming to the Central Plains was not that simple. Ren Xiaosu felt that Hope Media's newspaper was really good. He decided that from now on, he would have to pick up the day's newspaper whenever they passed by a stronghold. Only Li Ran was left sulking at the back of the off-road vehicle. This was because she carefully watched Ren Xiaosu flip through the newspapers during the entire journey and realized that it was not that he did not read entertainment news, but that he did not read entertainment news related to her. Regarding this, Zhou Yingzhu also got it wrong. Ren Xiaosu was actually quite concerned about entertainment news. He was really looking forward to seeing Luo Xinyu's picture appear in the entertainment sections of the newspapers. But unfortunately, there weren't any. Chapter 544 Meeting Wang Congjiang again. The tour group arrived at Stronghold 73 on the same night. On their way here, another 2 vehicles suffered breakdowns. Fortunately, they had employed a mechanic and brought maintenance tools with them this time. Otherwise, they might have gotten delayed again. When they arrived at Stronghold 73, the outside of the stronghold was a different sight. There was not just a town outside now, but a large military encampment had been set up as well. It felt like thousands of troops were stationed out there. If the tour group wanted to get into Stronghold 73, they would have to pass through this military encampment first. However, they got stopped at the entrance of the camp to be interrogated and inspected first. There was no problem with their customs documents, but everyone would have to go through a body search as well. Fortunately, the military personnel here were a principled bunch. Seeing that there were women in the group, they sent the military camp's female nurses to handle the body search for the women. In the end, it was the plainclothes guards protecting Li Ran's team who had the daggers and pistols all confiscated. They were told that they could come to the military camp to get them back once they left the stronghold. What surprised Li Ran and the others was that not a single weapon was found on Zhou Yingzhu and Ren Xiaosu. However, they were still not allowed to enter the stronghold after the security checks were complete. As there was a curfew in the stronghold right now, they had to wait until daybreak in the military camp. Only after 7 a.m. would the stronghold's gate be opened. Seeing that the stronghold was right in front, and that they had already booked the hotel in advance, Li Ran could not stand it anymore. They were already exhausted from traveling for the entire day, yet they still had to wait in the barracks until daybreak. But just as the soldier was done letting them know, a convoy passed through the military base and drove straight into the stronghold. After the stronghold's gate was opened, it came back down again. Li Ran was stunned for a moment before asking, "Didn't you say the stronghold gate would not be opened? Then what was with that convoy?" "There are Zhou Consortium's people," the Zhou Consortium soldiers said calmly. It was only natural for the Zhou Consortium's people to get privileged treatment at their own strongholds. Li Ran asked Fang Ji softly, "Can you contact the film crew in the stronghold and get them to think of a solution?" In the end, Fang Ji took the satellite phone and went outside to call the film crew. When he came back, he said helplessly, "They told us to settle such issues by ourselves." Li Ran went silent for a moment. She did not expect the film crew to be so heartless when the other party was clearly on good terms with the big shots of the Zhou Consortium. She thought for a while and said, "Try paying these soldiers and see if they can make an exception." But at such a time, no one dared to accept any bribes. The soldier explained that something big had just happened in the stronghold, and if they had read the newspapers, they would have known about the cave-in at East Lake. Therefore, no one dared to make any mistakes at a time like this. They did not even dare to accept bribes. Nothing could be done about the situation. At this moment, Li Ran was finally feeling a sense of helplessness in the face of a consortium. In the face of absolute military power, money and connections did not seem that useful anymore. However, Ren Xiaosu did not mind at all. He just sat down at the side and continued reading the newspapers. It was as if the soldiers coming and going were invisible to him. In the morning, Ren Xiaosu even shamelessly asked the officer for a copy of Hope Media's newspaper after it was distributed in the base. The Zhou Consortium troops were quite disciplined. They were only carrying out the duties by holding the Tor group outside the stronghold. As there were also Li Ran's fans within the base, no one would deliberately make things difficult for them. Ren Xiaosu saw in today's newspaper that the Zhou Consortium's troops had intercepted and wiped out a small group of Pyro Company members that were preparing to pull out of the stronghold. However, they did not find any laboratory data on them. This made Ren Xiaosu wonder if there was really any laboratory data in Stronghold 73 at all. When the stronghold's gate was opened, Li Ran and the others immediately entered the stronghold and headed to the hotel they had booked. In just one night, dark circles had already appeared under Li Ran's eyes. Zhou Yingzhu, on the other hand, seemed fine. After all, a supernatural being's physical fitness far exceeded that of a normal person's. On the way to the hotel, Ren Xiaosu froze. "What's wrong?" Zhou Yingzhu asked. Ren Xiaosu started rolling up the car window. Li Ran had already returned to her minivan, so he did not have to be so cautious with his words anymore. "Did you see that man? I want you to smear some of the four-leaf clover's extract on him. I need to know his whereabouts." Zhou Yingzhu nodded. "All right, but, Master, who is that?" "You don't know him," Ren Xiaosu said. "His name is Wang Congdiang. I didn't expect him to appear here." As they spoke, Zhou Yingshui's car fell out of the convoy and stopped by the side. Then she pretended she was going to buy breakfast and walked past Wang Congdiang. Zhou Yingzhu did not even come into contact with Wang Congdiang and simply flicked a drop of clover extract onto his clothes. After that, Zhou Yingzhu continued to get breakfast before slowly walking back to the car. "Master, do you want buns or fried dough sticks? I bought some of each." "Buns, I guess," Ren Xiaosu said with a frown. From afar, Wang Congdiang blended into the crowd after passing them by. He had quietly turned around to observe Zhou Yingzhu buying breakfast before returning to her car. Then the car drove off and gradually disappeared from the streets. Wang Congdiang carefully checked himself to see if there was any tracking equipment placed on him. After confirming there was nothing, he smiled. He was probably being too suspicious. When they arrived at the hotel, Li Ran did not even catch up on sleep and brought Fang Ji straight out. Zhou Yingzhu was grumbling in Ren Xiaosu's room. "She's off to meet that director in private. She doesn't want me to go with her as her bodyguard this time since she's obviously afraid the director will take a fancy to me and invite me to play a role in his production. She's so petty." Ren Xiaosu glanced at her and said with a smile, "You want to act in a movie? I do know a director myself, so if you really want to act in one, I can bring you to meet him when we're done here. I saved his life once." Zhou Yingzhu pursed her lips. "Master, when did you save a director? Why didn't I know about it?" "There's a lot of things that you don't know.
Ren Xiaosu turned around and asked, "Are you sure that everything's okay with the 4-leaf clover extract? Don't make any mistakes on this matter. I'll need you to lead me to him tonight so I can find out what he's up to." "Is this Wang Congjiang someone very important?" Zhou Yingzhu asked. "It's not that he's important, I just had a feud with him. But I'm more curious about what he's doing here at Stronghold 73. Ren Xiaosu thought for a moment and said, "I saw him as well near East Lake the other time, but I lost track of his whereabouts during the chaotic battle. I'm very sure that he was there for the lab's data, but now that the battle has concluded, why hasn't he left yet? Stronghold 73 is obviously not a safe place anymore for supernatural beings to hang around. If anything goes wrong, the Zhou Consortium might even start hunting him down." So Ren Xiaosu wondered if the matter of the research laboratory was not over yet. The answer to this question could only be revealed tonight. Chapter 545 Deja Vu. "Then I'll join you to fight tonight, Master," Zhou Yingzhu said confidently. "I'll catch up on some sleep first so I don't embarrass you later." When Ren Xiaosu heard the word, fight, he suddenly felt that he was like some hooligan on the streets picking a fight with someone else. But at this moment, there was a knock on the door of Zhou Yingshui's room next door. Zhou Yingzhu stood up curiously and went out to check. Who would be knocking on my door at this time? We just checked in, and it shouldn't be time for housekeeping yet, right? With that, Zhou Yingzhu opened the door and saw a group of people outside who immediately rushed into Ren Xiaosu's room under the lead of a middle-aged man when they saw her. Li Ran, who was standing behind these people, had a dark expression on her face. She had just gone to see the director of the film crew in the morning, but as the director had found out in the papers that she had a superhuman as her bodyguard, he immediately had her bring him to the hotel. He wanted to interview Zhou Yingzhu so he could add more content to the documentary regarding superhumans he was making. Li Ran did not know how to turn him down, so she had no choice but to take the crew and director to the hotel before her audition even started. When the director saw Zhou Yingzhu, he smiled happily and shook her hand. "You must be Ms. Zhou Yingzhu, I've heard a lot about you." However, when Zhou Yingzhu saw the other party's outstretched hand, she took a step back and said warily, "Speak properly, and don't get touchy with me." How could she, Zhou Yingzhu, casually hold the hand of another person? Her master was still in the room, and it would be bad if he saw that. When Zhou Yingzhu did not accept his handshake, the middle-aged man did not get angry. Instead, he introduced himself, "Hello, my name is Mu Wonge, and I'm a director." Then he incidentally saw Ren Xiaosu, who was sitting by the window, looking back at him calmly. Ren Xiaosu thought that since he had worn a large hood last time, and it was also nighttime, the other party should have only seen his face below his nose in that chaos. Under such circumstances, the other party would probably not recognize him. However, he realized he was wrong. He saw the way Mu Wonge was looking at him was not that of a normal person. "Savior!" Mu Wonge exclaimed. This exclamation frightened Zhou Yingzhu, Li Ran, and the others. Everyone watched in a daze as Mu Wonge walked towards Ren Xiaosu. Li Ran was absolutely dumbfounded by this. How did Ren Xiaosu suddenly end up as his savior? What kind of fucking twist was this? However, what made her a little unhappy was that the director who was acting all snobby with her just now was getting politer and politer with Zhou Yingzhu and Ren Xiaosu with each passing moment. Li Ran knew Mu Wonge was obsessed with supernatural beings and even wanted to direct a movie featuring a full cast of such people. But there was no need for such a big-time director to act so politely to supernatural beings, right? Moreover, what did Mu Wonge call Ren Xiaosu just now? Savior. Hang on a minute, Ren Xiaosu was Mu Wonge's savior. Li Ran asked, "Director Mu, why are you?" However, Mu Wonge cut her off and said to everyone behind him, "Can all of you please go outside for now? I have something to say to this young man." With that, he chased everyone out of the room. Li Ran was confused. Wasn't she supposed to be the one in the limelight today? Mu Wonge turned around and said to Ren Xiaosu warmly, "Savior." Ren Xiaosu shook his head. "You've got the wrong person. How can people like us who are involved in the visual arts possibly recognize the wrong person? Even if you had only revealed your chin that night, I would still recognize you." Mu Wonge rubbed his hands together gleefully and said, "Can I have your autograph?" "No,
Ren Xiaosu tactfully declined. In fact, he was even considering whether he should resort to silencing this person. Although, that was just a fleeting thought. It was a good thing that Mu Wonge did not know about Old Zhu. Otherwise, he would really have to seriously consider doing so. Mu Wonge said seriously, "Don't worry, I'll keep your involvement a secret, I swear to God. However, I would really like to ask if you would consider participating in my movie." But Ren Xiaosu was really uninterested in such matters. He got up and said, "It's best that you keep it a secret or else. You know exactly what I'm capable of. If my identity gets out, you won't have anywhere to run." After that, Ren Xiaosu pushed open the door and walked out. He passed through the crowd at the door and gestured for Zhou Yingzu to follow him. After the two of them left, the people outside still did not know what was going on. Mu Wonge walked out of the room and asked Li Ran warmly, "Do you want to be the female lead?" Li Ran answered blankly, "Of course. How about this, if you have a way to get them on set, or even take a role or two, I'll make you the female lead." With that, Mu Wonge left as well. Li Ran was extremely confused. Why did it feel like she was suddenly thrown into the deal as an extra? It was like buying jade and getting a free lucky bracelet as a gift. Mu Wonge said to the film crew as he walked, "Did you guys capture any footage of their backs on camera just now?" "Yes, but somehow, I have a feeling that their relationship isn't exactly that of a bodyguard and her assistant." The staff mumbled, "I feel like the female superhuman is subconsciously taking orders from the young man." With just a glance, she followed him and left. Mu Wonge took a deep breath. Of course, that was exactly how it was. The young man was pretending to be an assistant precisely because he was trying to keep his identity hidden. He recalled the scene from that night and wondered how such a superhuman could possibly be an assistant to someone. As he watched Ren Xiaosu leave with Zhou Yingzu, Mu Wonge imagined the mysterious youth leading the way while his beautiful attendant followed. This should be exactly how the mysterious wild world in a movie should look like. Mu Wonge thought for a moment and said, "Destroy all the captured footage. Secretly filming a person like that without their permission could get you into fatal trouble if you're discovered." Zhou Yingzu was following Ren Xiaosu and asking non-stop, "Master, did you really save that director? Then can you get him to arrange for me to be the female lead in his movie? And let that Li Ran act as a maid to me or something. Master, when did you save him? Master." Ren Xiaosu could not help but turn around and glare at her. "If you don't shut up and concentrate on tracking down the target, I'll cut your share from 20% to 10%. Zhou Yingzu immediately shut up and began searching for the scent of the four-leaf clover to locate Wang Kongyang's whereabouts. The two of them walked for nearly 30 kilometers in the stronghold before they finally started closing in on Wang Kongyang. Zhou Yingzu observed the source of where the smell was coming from and wondered, "I think Liberation Park's right up ahead. That's where Zhou Qilong and Luo Lan had their meeting. Wang Kongyang is right there." Ren Xiaosu took Zhou Yingzu up to the rooftop of a building where he set up his sniper rifle and observed the situation in the park. Meanwhile, Zhou Yingzu was munching on melon seeds next to him. Ren Xiaosu felt an uncanny sensation. "Why am I getting a feeling of déjà vu?" Chapter 546 The Pyro Company's Research Laboratory. Ren Xiaosu remembered that it was exactly the same situation as the previous time. After he had set up his sniper rifle, Zhou Yingzu started munching on melon seeds next to him. Back then, after the two of them accomplished their mission and went downstairs, Zhou Yingzu even shouted for him to save her when she got surrounded by enemies. Ren Xiaosu gave Zhou Yingzu a displeased look. "Stop munching on melon seeds. Take the spotting scope and check on the situation down there." When the two of them looked into the park, Ren Xiaosu immediately spotted Wang Kongyang. He was sitting on a bench and reading a newspaper as though he were a normal resident enjoying the fresh air in the park. However, Wang Kongyang stayed in the park for the next 5 hours, and this made Ren Xiaosu even more certain that there was something up with his trip here. A normal person would not come to sit on a park bench for 5 hours if they had nothing to do. Besides, sitting there for so long would definitely make their butt hurt too. Just as the sun was about to set, Zhou Yingzu suddenly said, "Master, a few suspicious people are approaching from the south side of Liberation Park." Ren Xiaosu took the spotting scope from Zhou Yingzu and looked over. She was not wrong.
There really was a group dressed in black jackets and beanies approaching the park. As they walked, their arms did not swing naturally with their footsteps. This was clearly because they had guns hidden under their armpits. On the other side of the park, Wang Congdiang suddenly stood up and left. There had to be some kind of connection between these two groups of people. Ren Xiaosu supposed they were up to something in Liberation Park. But what could be here in Liberation Park? It was clearly just a normal park. Right after, Ren Xiaosu saw someone among the people in black jackets take out a pocket-sized device resembling a cell phone. After fiddling with it for some time, one of them drew a circle on a certain patch of grass in the park. After they finished, they quickly left. But they didn't go too far away and ate at a nearby restaurant. It was as if they were waiting for something. Are they thinking of digging up the area marked by the circle? Zhou Yingzhu asked. It's just that there's still normal stronghold residents out in the park now, so they can't do anything about it. They're probably waiting until the curfew is in effect before making a move. But why did Wang Congdiang appear here? Could he be the one leading the group that's trying to dig for something in the park? Ren Xiaosu analyzed, there's a very strong possibility that he's the mastermind behind this operation. Don't the masterminds in the field of intelligence also coordinate operations from behind the scenes? They don't join the operations directly, right? That's right. Zhou Yingzhu nodded. Ren Xiaosu's interest was piqued. Whatever Wang Congdiang was trying to dig up must be very valuable, right? Master, what are we gonna do? Zhou Yingzhu asked. We're gonna snatch the prize from him, of course. Ren Xiaosu chuckled. Wang Congdiang had looked for trouble with him on several occasions before. If Ren Xiaosu went easy on him this time, that wouldn't make sense, would it? Then how should we do it? Go down there after they're done digging? Zhou Yingzhu asked. No, I'll go and deal with Wang Congdiang first. When they get frightened off, we can dig up the lawn and find out what's underneath, Ren Xiaosu said with a smile. With that, he led Zhou Yingzhu downstairs and walked to where Wang Congdiang would be. However, they did not expect to bump into Wang Congdiang right after walking past 2 streets. Ren Xiaosu wore the hood over his head and even deliberately pulled up the zipper really high. With his head lowered while walking, the other party could only see his chin at most. Ren Xiaosu and Zhou Yingzhu remained standing in their spot while Wang Congdiang also did the same. The two groups stood there in a deadlock. However, although Wang Congdiang did not recognize Ren Xiaosu, he recognized Zhou Yingzhu. He had already been suspicious of Zhou Yingzhu in the morning. Now that he saw a familiar face again, he realized in an instant that he had been followed. A group of students who just finished their evening self-study session passed by. Some of the students even looked curiously at the three of them, but they did not pay too much attention to it. They had to hurry home since it would be curfew soon. Just as the students walked past Ren Xiaosu and Zhou Yingzhu, Wang Congdiang suddenly turned around and ran. Ren Xiaosu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Wang Congdiang was still as careful as ever. He did not even intend to fight and only thought of fleeing. Ren Xiaosu sighed and said, "We've alerted him. Zhou Yingzhu and he could not go after him as it would be too obvious to start a chase in the streets at this time. In fact, it might even cause the Zhou Consortium's troops to come after them. Importantly, there were also supernatural beings among the Zhou Consortium troops." Next to him, Zhou Yingzhu cautiously said, "Master, my 4-leaf clover extract only allows me to determine the general direction, not the distance to the target. I wasn't expecting him to be walking towards us either." "Never mind." Ren Xiaosu took a look at the sky. "Since we've alerted them, the people who would be doing the digging should also have left. Wang Congdiang would surely have found a way to contact his partners about us. Let's head to the park right away and see what exactly they're after over there. You don't have to follow me. Just head back to the hotel first. It'll get a little dangerous there." What Ren Xiaosu was trying to say was, even if Zhou Yingzhu was also a supernatural being, she would only be a hindrance to him. After all, her combat power was way too terrible. But Zhou Yingzhu thought her master was pretty concerned about her safety. "Master, I'll come with you," Zhou Yingzhu said obediently. "Get lost." All right." Ren Xiaosu found a public bathroom and changed his attire. He also summoned his shadow clone and dressed it as well, even putting a pixie mask on it. The white mask from before could not be used as it would draw animosity from anyone who saw it. Under the cover of the curfew, Ren Xiaosu hurried towards Liberation Park, running behind his shadow clone. But what left Ren Xiaosu surprised was that before he got there, he could already hear the sound of digging. Wait, did Wang Congdiang not notify his partners to leave? Why was that group of people still digging up the ground over here? He ordered his shadow clone to go over. When the group saw his shadow clone approaching in its mask, they were not surprised. After all, they were carrying out something sneaky, so who would want to expose their identities to the consortiums? The people in black jackets looked at the shadow clone, and one of them said, "You must be Wang Congdiang, right? Where's your steam locomotive?" Ren Xiaosu was stunned when he heard this from where he was hiding. They had mistaken his shadow clone for Wang Congdiang. Could it be that Wang Congdiang was not with them? And as a result, Wang Congdiang did not let them know that he had been discovered. But why did these people want Wang Congdiang's steam locomotive? It was as if they also needed it for something besides using it to confirm his identity. However, after some thought, he gritted his teeth and conjured the steam locomotive out of thin air. He also deliberately controlled the train to not make any loud sounds. The leader of the black-jacketed people sized up the steam locomotive and nodded in satisfaction. "All right, your identity has been verified. After we get the data out from the ground, we'll board your steam locomotive and force our way out of here. You said that your steam locomotive can reach a maximum speed of 120 kilometers per hour, so the Zhou Consortium's troops will definitely not be able to catch up to you in the wilderness. When we get out of the stronghold, there will be people from the company coming to back us up. The research data will be placed in your steam locomotive, and since you've already accepted the payment, you'll have to ensure that it's delivered without a hitch." During their conversation, someone struck a metal cover in the ground while digging. The other party lifted the metal cover and entered inside. 15 minutes later, someone crawled out of the ground carrying a silver box with a logo of the Pyro Company on it. Ren Xiaosu was dumbfounded. So these people were the Pyro Company members in disguise. So it turned out that there was really a pre-cataclysm research laboratory in Stronghold 73. Moreover, due to the Zhou Consortium's blockade, the Pyro Company was not yet able to transport the research data out. Therefore, that was their reason for finding Wang Congdiang. They wanted to use his steam locomotive to barge out of the stronghold. Had Wang Congdiang switched industries to providing delivery services? Chapter 547 Amusement Park Train Ride. Ren Xiaosu ordered his shadow clone to wait beside the pit that had been dug up by the Pyro Company. The Pyro Company had 3 of their people remain outside while 6 members entered the pit. On the inside, they started shifting the research data into silver boxes before moving it out of the underground laboratory. Ren Xiaosu wanted to have his shadow clone peek into the laboratory to check on the situation. However, he was stopped by the 3 people standing guard outside. "You're only responsible for the transportation of the data. Don't be poking your nose into other matters." His shadow clone nodded and stood quietly by the side. Ren Xiaosu thought to himself that he would just have to wait for these people to load the research data onto his steam locomotive. The research data that so many people were after and was worth an astronomical price was actually going to be personally handed over to someone else by the Pyro Company's own people. Just how much would they hate Wang Congdiang once they realized this? The members of the Pyro Company nearby did not suspect anything. In fact, they were already being very cautious about the operation. Upon meeting Wang Congdiang, they first confirmed his identity by having him reveal his superpower. This was not something anyone could impersonate. After all, everyone's powers were unique. Even if there might be similar skills, it would be for superhumans who controlled elements such as water and fire. But there couldn't be 2 people with the same steam locomotive power, could there? As they continued to excavate the ground, boxes were continuously sent up. A Pyro Company member looked at the shadow clone and said, "We'll pay 50% of the reward to your account first. Once we're outside the stronghold, the remaining 50% will be paid out. Are you still using the same account that you provided to us previously?" Ren Xiaosu turned anxious. How could he allow the money to be transferred to Wang Congdiang's account? The job was obviously going to be done by him, so it should be transferred into his own account. His shadow clone quickly used a tree branch to write out a string of numbers on the grass. There were even 5 words at the end of it, "Blessed be the good man." The Pyro Company member chuckled at the sight. "You want to use a new account, right? Sure." As he spoke, he gestured for the person next to him to transfer the money into the new account. Based on their agreement, the job was quoted at 2 million yuan. Therefore, 1 million yuan would be paid as the deposit first. The Pyro Company member sized up the shadow clone. "I've long heard that you, Wang Congdiang, are extremely cautious. I didn't expect you to be so cautious that you'd wrap yourself up so tightly, though. You don't even want to speak. Why, are you afraid someone will identify your voice?" The fact that the shadow clone could not speak had been misunderstood by the other party as Wang Congdiang's cautiousness. All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu thought Wang Congdiang's identity could prove quite useful in the Central Plains. As for whether Wang Congdiang would get into any trouble after that, it was none of Ren Xiaosu's business. All of the research data underground was finally transported out. The members of the Pyro Company loaded up 13 boxes of research data onto the steam locomotive. However, before they could start pulling out of the stronghold, several bright flashlights approached from outside Liberation Park. The Pyro Company members immediately frowned and looked at Wang Congdiang. "You betrayed us." The shadow clone shook its head. One of the Pyro Company members carefully looked at the source of the light. "It's a Zhou Consortium patrol. They might just be on a routine patrol. Should we kill them or just leave?" "Kill them." One of them drew a saber from his belt. "T4138, take 5 people with you to cut those troops off at the rear and eliminate them. The other 3 of us will leave on the steam locomotive first. Once you've taken care of them, the 6 of you can seek refuge in the safe house and wait there for any new Stronghold 73 missions." "Understood," T4138 and the others said respectfully. "You'll need to give them the chance to fire at all of you. Only then can you draw their attention to Liberation Park, and we'll be able to escape the stronghold with the research data, understand?" "Understood," T4138 and the others replied. Ren Xiaosu was listening from nearby. He found it quite novel that these people were actually addressing each other by their code names. Under the cover of darkness in Liberation Park, the 6 Pyro Company members quietly made their way over. Before the patrol troops could even get close to the steam locomotive, they were ambushed. The platoon had been patrolling around Liberation Park in the usual patrol formation, 30 soldiers marching in 2 parallel rows. Due to security guidelines, the safeties on these soldiers' guns were all on. Furthermore, the first 2 bullets in their magazines were blanks that would only be fired as a warning. It wasn't that they were stupid, but that the security guidelines throughout the stronghold were all like that. However, when they passed by the woods in the park, they heard some sudden movements behind them. The platoon commander turned around and saw that 6 of his comrades at the back of the platoon had already had the throat slit. Furthermore, the culprits did not run away and even smiled at them. "Contact! Open fire!" the platoon commander shouted. As he shouted, everyone in the platoon disengaged the safety on the guns. However, the 6 people who had ambushed them were like apparitions. The soldiers couldn't get a bead on the enemies due to how fast they were moving. A gust of wind blew and the leaves rustled. The enemy's footsteps sounded like they were just beside them, yet the patrol troops could not figure out where the enemy was. Gunshots suddenly rang out inside Liberation Park. Ever since the tunnel cave-in at East Lake, the atmosphere across Stronghold 73 remained extremely tense. But what was unexpected was that even after imposing such strict security, there were actually still people committing murder. Furthermore, the victims were the Zhou Consortium's patrol troops. Upon hearing the gunshots, a member of the Pyro Company standing next to the shadow clone said to it, "Let's go, Wang Congdiang. We'll charge out from the east gate and break through the walls before turning southeast. There'll be someone picking us up once we get far away." The shadow clone took the lead and boarded the steam locomotive. The Pyro Company members kept an intent eye on Wang Congdiang in the conductor's seat in case he tried any tricks. Meanwhile, Ren Xiaosu took advantage of the moment they were boarding the train to get to the side of it and grab a hold of the exterior. The steam locomotive started moving. However, the Pyro Company members realized the steam locomotive was not heading out of Liberation Park. Instead, it was just circling the park. When the Pyro Company members realized this, they frowned and said, "Why aren't we leaving? What are you driving around the park? Do you think you're operating an amusement park train ride? In the end, they saw Wang Congdiang pull the black saber out of thin air. A pyro company member sneered and said, "So you're planning to double-cross us, huh? But don't you think you should ask yourself if you're capable of doing so? There's 3 of us but only 1 of you. You're already using your steam locomotive, and we're aboard the train as well, so don't tell me you can still knock us down." Actually, this pyro company member's logic was not wrong at all. A superhuman could only have 1 power. Now that they were all aboard the steam locomotive, Wang Congdiang's physical fitness might not even match theirs as soldiers who had been genetically modified. So if Wang Congdiang were trying to double-cross them in this situation, it would be as good as suicide. The only thing they did not expect was that the person in front of them was not Wang Congdiang. Or more accurately, this person in front of them was not even human. Then the steam locomotive came to an abrupt halt. Due to the immense inertia, the 3 pyro company members staggered forward a couple steps before charging the shadow clone. Chapter 548 Brothers in Cauldrons. When a steam locomotive suddenly came to a stop while traveling at high speed, if the inertia couldn't be precisely predicted beforehand to adjust for one's center of gravity, then there would definitely be a huge loss of balance. Balance was one of the most important things for every combatant. Not to mention a battle between supernatural beings, even if it were just a battle between normal people, a combatant who had lost their balance was as good as a fish on the chopping board. The pyro company members had extremely good physical fitness, and normal supernatural beings could not compare to them. Therefore, at the moment of imbalance, they quickly used their feet to adjust their center of gravity so they would not end up in a particularly sorry state and bump into the shadow clone's blade. But as long as they were thrown off even a little, they would definitely expose an opening. The shadow clone zipped past the 3 of them with the black saber in hand while the pyro company members tried their best to slash at its body. But to their surprise, they discovered that there was no sound at all when their sabers struck the shadow clone's body. It was as though the 3 of them were not brandishing swords but pieces of paper instead. The shadow clone's black saber was already closing in towards them. One of the pyro company members instinctively raised his arm in hopes of slowing down the black saber's attack. However, when the black saber slashed across his arm, it did not feel like it had slowed down at all. Such sharpness! That pyro company member was shocked. "It's you. Just who on earth are you? Why are you always going against our pyro company?" But just as he finished speaking, he lost consciousness. Ren Xiaosu had already clashed with the pyro company on more than one occasion. The pyro company had long known there was someone capable of using a sharp weapon to cut a human in half. While the storyteller's incredible tales sounded quite believable sometimes, there were not many swords in reality that were capable of that. Therefore, slashing a human in half across the waist was usually due to great strength by the wielder and not because the blade was really sharp. As for the pyro company, they had discovered during the recovery of the dead that the skeletal structures were cleanly cut across at the waist. This was all down to the might of the saber itself. When the 3 pyro company members died, Ren Xiaosu gave a wave of his hand and the steam locomotive disappeared with a puff. He stuffed all 13 boxes of the laboratory data into his storage space and left before the Zhou Consortium's troops could arrive at Liberation Park. Furthermore, Ren Xiaosu took the corpses of the 3 pyro company members away with him. The other party had recognized who he was just now. Although they still had not figured out his identity, if the pyro company found their corpses, they would surely know it was not Wang Congdiang's doing. That wouldn't do. He had to blame him entirely. Not long after Ren Xiaosu left, the 6 members of the pyro company who were in charge of taking out the patrol team also fled. They still did not know what happened over here and thought the mission was a success. When they returned to the safe house, they contacted their headquarters and reported the situation on their side. In the end, the P3 commander who oversaw the operation told them the steam locomotive did not leave the stronghold at all. In fact, it did not even leave the park. Only then did the pyro company realize that something had happened. It had all gone wrong. The commander on the other end of the satellite call asked coldly, "The superhuman responsible for escorting a miss called Wang Congdiang, right?" The 6 members of the pyro company answered in panic, "Yes, it's Wang Congdiang. His power allows him to conjure a steam locomotive. We all saw him do so with our own eyes." "Okay, I'll send out an internal memo for his arrest. The commander hung up. Then he said to the person next to him, the deposit of 1 million yuan has already been paid. Follow up and investigate the recipient's account. At this moment, the girl with the canine teeth who was in the residence stared at the screen in front of her. She was stunned because a deposit of 1 million yuan suddenly appeared in one of the accounts on the surveillance monitors. Strange, wasn't this one of their Anjing House's anonymous accounts that they were monitoring? The account holder did not accept any new missions, so where did the money come from? She made a call to find out the source of the funds. But upon checking, she realized the 1 million yuan was paid out from the Pyro Company's account. What the hell, didn't this account holder kill a lot of people from the Pyro Company previously? Why did the Pyro Company send him the money then? To thank him for not killing the rest of them. This was way too strange. She had to tell the boss about it quickly. As for the Pyro Company, they were also checking on the account details. It was really easy to obtain information on these consortium's bank accounts. Of course, the Anjing House was different from the Pyro Company. The Pyro Company was an organization on the level of a consortium. Therefore, their account number was always public. The girl with the canine teeth was able to find out about this with a simple check. Meanwhile, Anjing House's accounts were all secret accounts. When the Pyro Company searched for the account, they could not determine who it was registered to. However, looking at the transaction records of the account, on the night of the cave-in at East Lake, someone had transferred 300,000 yuan into the account. This was obviously the reward paid out by the Anjing House to a hitman for killing a member of Midnight. So the Pyro Company linked it to the Anjing House. When the P3 commander reported this matter to the higher-ups of the Pyro Company, they were extremely angered. This was because if Wang Congdiang were really a member of the Anjing House, then the Pyro Company would have lost in their conflict with them this time. It didn't matter how many of their members died. The laboratory data was what mattered most of all. If Wang Congdiang were really from the Anjing House, then it was equivalent to him scamming the laboratory data out of their hands. The higher-ups of the Pyro Company felt like their intelligence had been utterly insulted. Wang Congdiang was in the wilderness outside of Stronghold 73 at the moment. When he realized he was being followed, he immediately gave up on the mission and fled. For someone like him, what could be more important than his life? But as he walked on, Wang Congdiang felt that something was amiss. He suddenly raised his hand in the isolated wilderness, and a huge black cauldron appeared out of thin air. Wang Congdiang was dumbstruck. What the fuck was this? Wait, a black cauldron. Why did he feel like he had seen this before? Since Wang Congdiang and Zhu Xianchu were former brothers in arms, he was also quite concerned about Zhu Xianchu's news. Wang Congdiang knew Zhu Xianchu had a similar black cauldron. Reportedly, the black cauldron was extremely powerful and could be used as a shield against bullets and attack people too. But why did he also have a black cauldron? Even though he had heard before that some supernatural beings could have two powers, this was ridiculous. Besides, for Zhu Xianchu and him to each have a black cauldron, what the hell was that about? Wouldn't that make them brothers in cauldrons? Unlike Zhu Xianchu, who happily accepted the black cauldron, Wang Congdiang felt that there had to be something fishy. The appearance of this black cauldron was definitely not because he had awakened a new power but due to some external factor. However, he couldn't figure out what that external factor was. At the same time, the Zhou Consortium troops had started sealing off Liberation Park. Then a supernatural being followed the troops into the park. The commander of the Zhou Consortium troops said politely to the supernatural being, "Mr. Li, you may begin now." The person called Mr. Li was a middle-aged man who did not really look too impressive. However, he was a rather spirited man. He raised his hand and waved it to produce a white mist. Gradually, the white mist started displaying some weird images at the pit dug by the Pyro Company. Through the images, it showed the Pyro Company members discussing something with Wang Congdiang, and a steam locomotive was even parked next to them. Chapter 549 Backlash. If Ren Xiaosu were present, he would immediately understand this supernatural being named Mr. Li had the power of retrocognition. He was capable of replaying an earlier scene of anything that happened in an area. Within that white mist, a projection of the Pyro Company members and Wang Congdiang was replayed accurately scene by scene. Mr. Li, can you make it go back a little further to the beginning? We want to see the entirety of what took place here, said the Joe Consortium commander. Someone beside him had already set up a camera to record the projected imagery. Mr. Lee nodded. The projection within the mist reversed as the motion of the people inside became distorted. The projection in the mist kept reversing until it reached a point when Wang Congdiang appeared while the pyro company was excavating the ground. Mr. Lee shook his head. I can only make it go back this much. Fortunately, there weren't too many people here. Otherwise, I couldn't even focus the projection properly. All right, thank you, the Joe Consortium commander said politely. Can you also please translate what they were saying? Mr. Lee already had his assistant who could read lips standing by. When the pyro company member opened his mouth to speak in the projection, the assistant interpreted what he said based on the shape of his mouth. You must be Wang Congdiang, right? Where's your steam locomotive? All right, your identity has been verified. After we get the data out from the ground. Everything the pyro company member had said was interpreted. From the beginning to the end, Wang Congdiang had not said a single word. Following that, they discussed killing the patrol troops and then, Wang Congdiang led the pyro company members to leave. The projection stopped at this point. It seemed that Mr. Lee's power had reached its limit. However, something unexpected happened during the last scene. Another blurry figure emerged from the woods and grabbed the exterior of the train carriage as it left. Who is that? The Joe Consortium commander said in surprise. We didn't spot him. Where was he hiding? Mr. Lee pointed to the woods nearby. He was hiding over there the whole time. We didn't see him because he didn't show up until the end. That's strange. So who could this person be? Was he tailing the pyro company? Perhaps someone from the Anjing house. The Joe Consortium commander frowned. But Mr. Lee, why couldn't we see his face clearly? It looks like his body is entirely shrouded in a layer of fog. Mr. Lee also found it a little strange. He walked closer and carefully observed the figure of Ren Xiaosu who had grabbed hold of the exterior. He realized the other party was indeed shrouded in a layer of fog, making it difficult for anyone to get a clear look at his appearance and clothing. They could only tell that it was a person. This has never happened before. Mr. Lee asked, why is this person so special? We found traces of blood on the ground nearby, but we didn't find any bodies. Furthermore, the steam locomotive did not drive out of the park. The Joe Consortium commander said, so we suspect that something might have happened inside the park after the steam locomotive drove off. Can you create more projections and show us what might have really happened at that time? Mr. Lee shook his head. I can only use my power once a day, but even if I use it again tomorrow, we'll have already passed the time limit to recreate the scene. The Joe Consortium commander asked, then can you think of something so we can get a clearer look at this blurry figure? I think he might be the key figure in this matter. I'll try my best, Mr. Lee said. At this moment, the projected steam locomotive was parked right in front of them. In it, the figure of Ren Xiaosu was still grabbing the exterior. It was like a scene from a movie that had been paused. Mr. Lee stood in front of Ren Xiaosu and waved his hand again, trying to disperse the fog around Ren Xiaosu. But when he focused on Ren Xiaosu, the blurry figure suddenly moved. In the projection, the steam locomotive was still paused. However, Ren Xiaosu turned his head and looked calmly at Mr. Lee. The look in his eyes was so cold it was extremely intimidating. With just a quiet look, Mr. Lee felt as though he were being stared down by a terrible beast. Only the eyes of the blurry figure were incomparably clear. Mr. Lee spat blood and collapsed to the ground. I can't do this anymore. I can't get a clear look at all. This is so strange. Just who on earth could this person be? Why can he counter my power? Uproar broke out all around. No one had expected such an outcome. In the past, everything would always proceed very smoothly whenever Mr. Lee helped them with an investigation. It was really easy to find criminals with his assistance. However, they failed this time, and Mr. Lee even suffered backlash from using his power. The circumstances in which Mr. Lee's superpower came about were actually quite odd. He was just a normal researcher in the past, but when his wife was robbed and killed one night, Mr. Lee became so heartbroken that he swore to catch the murderer. However, the Public Order Division's staff said no surveillance cameras were in the area that day the robbery took place, so it made it very difficult for them to catch the murderer. In the end, Mr. Lee's power was awakened, and he led the Public Order Division to find the culprit behind the crime. After that, Mr. Lee did not keep this power to himself. Every day, he would assist the Joe Consortium in handling some of the more difficult cases they were facing, and the Joe Consortium would pay him for his services as well. Due to the fact the projections were only visual and without sound, he even hired an assistant who could read lips. Meanwhile, Ren Xiaosu, who was already cooped up back in the hotel, started. Zhou Yingzhu asked, "What's wrong, master?" Ren Xiaosu frowned. It felt like someone was watching me a moment ago, but that feeling went away very quickly. I'm not exactly sure what happened either. Zhou Yingzhu glanced at the window, but the curtains were drawn. I've already checked the room. There aren't any surveillance cameras around. Okay. Ren Xiaosu nodded and took out the 13 boxes containing the research information. Zhou Yingzhu was stunned. Master, what is all this? Ren Xiaosu briefly told her about tonight's happenings in which the Pyro Company had tried to transport the laboratory data out of the stronghold and how a fight had broken out between him and the Pyro Company members. Zhou Yingzhu was speechless. So it turned out that so much had happened tonight. Master, I thought you were just going for a little excavation trip, but I didn't know a battle would actually break out. How dangerous. It was really quite dangerous for them, Ren Xiaosu replied absent-mindedly. His attention was already on the research information in front of him. So, Master, is this the lab data? Zhou Yingzhu asked with her eyes gleaming. So if we sell this data, wouldn't we have nothing more to worry about for the rest of our lives? Only if you're still alive to not have to worry. Ren Xiaosu said calmly, once you sell the data, a lot of people will definitely target you. The Pyro Company will probably hunt you down to the ends of the earth as well. Don't assume that you can do it so well that no one will find out. There's no such thing as an absolute secret. Therefore, if Ren Xiaosu really wanted to sell the laboratory data, he only had two choices. One of them was Fortress 178, but he wasn't sure if they would be interested in it. The other was the King Consortium. Ren Xiaosu would only feel at ease if he was selling it to either of these parties. Chapter 550 Wanted, Wang Congjiang. Ever since Ren Xiaosu snatched the laboratory data out of the Pyro Company's hands, everything seemed to have calmed down, and it became peaceful again in the stronghold. Other than the Zhou Consortium issuing a warrant for Wang Congjiang, there didn't seem to be anything else that cheered Ren Xiaosu up. In the dead of the night, Ren Xiaosu was alone in his hotel room going through the Pyro Company's research data. He was quite curious about the Pyro Company because he had once faced the monsters this organization had created. That group of experimentals was still forcibly occupying the wilderness in the southwest, and it was unknown when they would become a threat to humanity once again. If he did not get rid of such a terrifying existence, there would probably be a much greater calamity in the future. Therefore, Ren Xiaosu was very curious about what the Pyro Company really did. However, when he browsed through the data, he was surprised to discover it was different than he had imagined. This life sciences research laboratory had genuinely been researching anti-cancer drugs. Furthermore, based on some of the research papers' background and significance, the Pyro Company had no other objectives but to treat patients and save lives. There was nothing in the data to suggest they were against humanity. If Ren Xiaosu were to just look at this information, he would probably think the Pyro Company was a typical medical institution whose mission was to treat and save lives. This was quite different from the Pyro Company Ren Xiaosu knew. But it wasn't like Ren Xiaosu was starting to feel that the Pyro Company was a benevolent organization after reading through the information. Instead, he was wondering why the Pyro Company had become the current organization they were after the cataclysm. It was very difficult for Ren Xiaosu to have a good impression of the Pyro Company's mass abduction of supernatural beings. Disregarding the other things they did, that matter alone was enough for Ren Xiaosu to hate them. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu suddenly saw a separate document on its own. The document's content was very short, but in it, it was stated that Laboratory Number 39 had made a breakthrough in cancer treatment. The single nucleus cells in a patient were turned into binucleated cells and managed to reach a state of equilibrium. However, the treatment's conditions were extremely particular and difficult to replicate.
Ren Xiaosu was stunned. There seemed to still be a lot of cancer patients after the cataclysm, possibly due to the after-effects of radiation from nuclear fallout. But he did not expect the Pyro Company to have already found a treatment for cancer before the cataclysm. However, what were these particular conditions the Pyro Company was referring to? While Ren Xiaosu was reading through the information, Li Ran and the others seemed to have returned to the hotel after a banquet. Many of them had too much to drink and were being rowdy in the hallways. However, this did not affect Ren Xiaosu at all. But in the middle of the night, Li Ran actually knocked on his door again in another drunken stupor. Ren Xiaosu simply pretended to not be in the room so he could have some peace and quiet. The next morning, Li Ran's assistant, Fang Ji, came over to invite Ren Xiaosu to the film set on the pretext of touring the place. Zhou Yingzhu would definitely have to go since she was Li Ran's bodyguard. However, Ren Xiaosu was not interested and rejected him. It was probably director Mu Wanji's idea to have him go down to the film set. When Fang Ji realized he could not convince Ren Xiaosu, he lied that Li Ran and Zhou Yingzhu were in danger on set and asked him to hurry over to help them. However, Ren Xiaosu shot him a look and closed the door without even bothering. Like hell I'd believe you. Both the Pyro Company and the Anjing House had already pulled out of the stronghold, so what kind of danger could there be? Even Wang Congdiang had probably run far away by now, while the underworld criminals have started to keep the distance from Stronghold 73. You could say Stronghold 73 was one of the safest strongholds in the entire world right now, and that wouldn't be an exaggeration at all. After the film crew wrapped up for the night, it became Mu Wanji's turn to harass him personally. He was constantly talking about having Ren Xiaosu play some role in his production. After Ren Xiaosu chased Mu Wange away, he asked Zhou Yingzhu speechlessly, when will that Li Ran set out for the next stronghold? Zhou Yingzhu said, according to the schedule, we should have set out 2 days ago. After all, the concert in Stronghold 74, which is the farthest west one, is slated to take place in 7 days. We were only supposed to be here for the audition, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, this director suddenly became very enthusiastic towards Li Ran. In fact, he even arranged a very good role for her in his current production, and they're working overtime to film the scenes right now. Ren Xiaosu gazed up at the ceiling. He knew that unforeseen circumstances was probably referring to him. However, when Zhou Yingzhu mentioned Stronghold 74, Ren Xiaosu got a little uneasy. He felt like something bad was about to happen. However, it was only a fleeting thought. He would definitely not try to persuade the tour group to change their schedule with something so baseless. But it was not that he had no evidence to support that thinking. When the Zhou Consortium's reinforcements did not head to Stronghold 73 and were redirected to Stronghold 74 to set up the defenses there, Ren Xiaosu was very puzzled. It was as though the Zhou Consortium knew something was going to happen at Stronghold 74. Ren Xiaosu told Zhou Yingzhu, if anything happens at Stronghold 74, ignore Li Ran and her team's wishes. Get the situation under control and take them away with you. Could the Zhou Consortium have received news about the possibility of a Qing Consortium invasion? After all, the Qing Consortium was the closest to Stronghold 74. Ren Xiaosu asked, so when are they planning to leave for Stronghold 74? Aren't they gonna hold a concert there? They have to get there early to make preparations, don't they? No need. It's all handled by the concert promoter. Zhou Yingzhu said, they plan to set out in 5 days. Ren Xiaosu gazed at the ceiling again. He would have to be harassed for another 5 days. He got up and said to Zhou Yingzhu, stay here and protect her. I'll head to Stronghold 74 first. I can do some missions or steal some cell phones while I'm there. I remember you telling me that there's also a black market at Stronghold 74, right? I'll go there and sell off some of the cell phones first. Zhou Yingzhu panicked. Master, are you going to leave right now? But I've already told them I'll bring you to the set. Ren Xiaosu silently gazed at Zhou Yingzhu. Zhou Yingzhu knew she had said the wrong thing again. Director Mu promised me that as long as I convince you to join the crew, he'll give the female lead to me and cast Li Ran as the supporting actress. Ren Xiaosu got furious. Mu Wange actually succeeded in turning Zhou Yingzhu against him. He looked at Zhou Yingzhu with disappointment. Do you really wanna be the female lead that badly? With that, Ren Xiaosu turned around and left.
After he went out of the stronghold, he suddenly remembered he had forgotten to ask Zhou Yingzhu where Stronghold 74 was. Furthermore, all of their vehicles had been detained by the Zhou Consortium, so he did not even have a car he could drive. Walking in the wilderness, Ren Xiaosu got angrier the more he thought about it. He really wanted to go back there and give Mu Wangge, Zhou Yingzhu, and Li Ran a good thrashing. But right then, Ren Xiaosu heard the roar of an engine behind him. He turned around and saw an off-road vehicle approaching. As the vehicle passed Ren Xiaosu, it came to a stop. A middle-aged man looked at him and said with a polite smile, "Where are you headed, young man? Why are you walking by yourself?" Ren Xiaosu thought for a moment and said, "I'm going to Stronghold 74. While speaking, Ren Xiaosu started sizing up the other party. There were only 2 people in the vehicle, one of which was a middle-aged man, while the other was a young man who looked to be about the same age as Ren Xiaosu. The 2 looked like they were father and son. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "We happen to be heading to Stronghold 74 too. Get in, we'll give you a ride." This concludes the chapters for today. Show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribe.